Beneath the waves lies a history far older than the land we walk upon. A realm where shadows moved like mountains, and the water itself seemed to bend around them. These were not the creatures of fairy tales or distant myth, but living giants, masters of a world untouched by human eyes. Their shapes were alien yet deliberate, every curve and ridge formed by eons of evolution in an endless blue wilderness. As you settle into night, let the sound of this ancient sea surround you. Imagine the swell of unseen tides, the brush of something vast passing in the dark. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Somewhere, perhaps, it is just before dawn. Somewhere else, the night is deep and without stars. But here in this moment, we return together to an ocean where size knew no limits. The water folds over you, swallowing the last fragments of daylight, until only a faint, trembling glow lingers. Down here, the surface feels unreal, as though it belongs to another lifetime. Pressure presses close, the currents coil like living threads, and the silence is thick enough to feel. Yet this is no empty abyss. Out of the haze, shapes begin to stir, slow, deliberate, impossibly large. At first you see nothing more than a pale shimmer, like moonlight caught on glass. Then muscle ripples through the gloom, each movement sending a shudder through the water. The rest of the form stretches on, a living horizon that never seems to end. Some wear jaws studded with teeth as long as a man's arm. Others carry shells like drifting fortresses, spiraled and ancient. The sea parts for them, smaller creatures scattering in every direction. Each giant moves as though it has always been here, as though the ocean itself was shaped to hold it. No eyes have ever watched them like this. Only the deep, steady heartbeat of the water has marked their passing, and in this moment you are adrift among rulers older than land itself. A shadow glides beneath you, so vast it feels as if the sea floor itself has begun to move. The water thickens, vibrating faintly, with the slow rhythm of its passage. There is no rush, no sudden lunge, only the steady command of something that knows nothing here can challenge it. A glint catches in the dark, a single scale flashing like polished metal before vanishing again. Schools of smaller fish break apart ahead of it, their silver bodies scattering into streaks of light. You catch the curve of a fin cutting upward, slicing through the gloom with the grace of a drifting island. The creature's presence changes the current, tilting you ever so slightly, as though the ocean is making room for its oldest monarchs. Around you, the deep feels alive, currents whispering, unseen bodies shifting just beyond sight. These waters are not quiet, they are listening. Every sound, every flicker of movement, is carried on invisible waves to giants that have mastered patience as their weapon. In this slow, endless expanse, power is not measured in speed, but in how effortlessly the world bends to make way for them. And you, for now, drift unnoticed through their ancient dominion. Far ahead, a ripple shimmers like heat over stone, yet there is no sun here to cause it. The distortion grows, and from its center, a shape emerges, the ridged outline of a jaw that seems carved from living rock. Rows of teeth, each serrated and white as bone, curve inward into the darkness of its mouth. You know this predator has no need to chase. It waits, drifting in the current, letting the ocean deliver its prey. Muscles coil along its sides, each one thick as a tree trunk, flexing in slow, powerful waves. Smaller creatures vanish in an instant, their scattering shadows swallowed into silence. For a heartbeat, its eye meets yours, cold, unblinking, reflecting nothing but the endless blue. Then, with a single slow turn, it fades back into the haze, leaving only the memory of scale and shadow, and the lingering awareness that it could still be near. The water ahead swirls as if stirred by a giant's hand. From the shifting blue, a massive shell materializes, its spirals marked by ancient scars and ridges, worn smooth by centuries of motion. It rotates with a patient rhythm, revealing openings along its edges, where thick, muscular limbs extend. One by one, they reach out, pulling its fortress through the deep. Each movement stirs up clouds of silt that drift like smoke, settling slowly back to the seafloor. You realize that for something so large, it moves with near-perfect silence, its progress measured, not in haste, but inevitability. The shell catches faint light, revealing a surface etched by the ages, a record of survival in a world where only the colossal endure. As it drifts past, its bulk blocks out everything behind it, and for a moment the ocean feels smaller, reshaped by the quiet dominance of a creature that has seen worlds rise and fall above the waves. From the murk below, a shadow breaks upward, long and sinuous, its body weaving like a river made of muscle. The motion is hypnotic, coils sliding one over another, each twist revealing the sheer length of this hunter. Along its flanks, fins ripple like banners in a slow wind, propelling it without a sound. It does not swim so much as it glides, slipping between the layers of water, as if they were doors only it knows how to open. The head comes into view, long, tapered, lined with teeth that seem to stretch endlessly toward the back of the jaw. A flick of its tail sends a surge of current over you, cool and strong enough to make your chest tighten. In its wake, the water smells faintly of brine and something metallic, a ghost of the life it has taken. The giant vanishes again, but you sense that it circles, curious about the quiet intruder adrift in its territory. Above, a shadow eclipses the faint glow filtering down from the surface. At first it feels like a drifting cloud, but the shape hardens into something solid, a vast flat body with wings that seem to stretch into the dark on either side. It glides effortlessly, every movement precise and minimal, as though conserving energy is the true art of survival. Its underside gleams pale in the dim light, and its mouth opens into a cavern wide enough to swallow entire shoals in a single pass. Around its body, smaller creatures follow closely, sheltering in its slipstream, feeding on whatever fragments are left behind. The great wings shift, catching unseen currents, and the giant turns without breaking its rhythm. The ocean tilts around it, the currents bending to its course. Even as it disappears into the deeper blue, you feel the subtle change it leaves behind, as though the water itself remembers it was here. A distant shimmer catches the light, growing larger until it reveals the glint of scales, so massive each one could be mistaken for a shield. The creature's body moves like a slow rolling tide, its length vanishing into the dark beyond sight. Along its sides, ridges rise and fall, carrying with them the faint vibration of muscle shifting beneath armor. Its head is broad, almost triangular, with eyes that do not dart or blink, but simply observe with the calm authority of something that has never known fear. As it draws closer, the water grows warmer, as if its sheer presence alters the environment around it. Smaller fish cling to its shadow, darting in and out, feeding on unseen scraps. When it turns, the movement is deliberate, each sweep of its tail sending a surge through the deep that rocks you gently. It disappears into the haze, yet its presence feels etched into the water itself, lingering long after the body is gone. From the gloom below, a slow, deliberate pulse of light emerges, not the trick of the sun, but a glow born from within. The body it belongs to materializes in fragments. First the gleam of translucent skin stretched over muscle, then the vast arched fins sweeping downward in rhythm with the flicker. It moves with hypnotic steadiness, its light pulsing like a heartbeat that belongs to the sea itself. Predators of lesser size scatter, unwilling to challenge something that illuminates its own path through the dark. The flickering glow shifts as the creature tilts, revealing a mouth lined with countless small hooked teeth, not for tearing in rage, but for holding, trapping, consuming without haste. Its path curves wide around you, the glow dimming as it passes, until the dark closes in again. But the rhythm of that light, that steady pulse remains in your mind like an echo that will not fade. A sudden shift in current brushes against your skin, pulling at you as if the ocean itself is moving in one direction. From that invisible tide, a bulk emerges, darker than the surrounding blue, its sheer size forcing the water to swirl and fold around it. The head is long, narrow, tapering into a snout that breaks the stillness in front of it. As it approaches, its body reveals itself in sections, first the armored ridges, then the vast pectoral fins that flare like sails in the deep. Its tail moves in sweeping arcs, sending silent waves into the surrounding water. You watch it glide effortlessly, the bulk of its form casting a shadow that seems to stretch endlessly behind. It passes so close you can see the faint patterns etched along its skin, marks not of injury, but of age, as if the sea itself has written its history there. Even when it vanishes, the current it created continues to push against you, proof that its presence still lingers nearby. Above, faint shafts of light reach down like searching fingers, briefly illuminating a form that is both strange and familiar. The outline resembles a massive elongated fish, yet its proportions are all wrong. The head too large, the fins too broad, the body too thick, with muscle to match anything that exists today. It moves with uncanny grace, rising through the water with each slow beat of its tail, its path weaving through invisible layers of the deep. A school of smaller swimmers scatters ahead of it, their silver bodies flashing like sparks before vanishing into the dark. The creature turns slightly, revealing an enormous mouth that yawns open to pull in an entire cloud of prey, with a single, effortless inhale. The water trembles faintly with the power of it. Then, with another sweeping motion of its tail, it slips back into the depths, leaving nothing but drifting particles behind, the last trace of its silent hunt. From the far edge of vision, something massive stirs, and the faint haze of the deep begins to shift. At first, you can only see the suggestion of movement, the bending of water, the faint flash of a fin tip. Then the darkness parts, and the full span of the creature emerges. Because its body is wider than the spread of your arms, each segment of its spine arching upward before dipping into the next. The head is blunt, framed by thick ridges that give it a fortress-like appearance. It drifts toward you with the confidence of something that has never needed to flee, its eyes deep set and glinting faintly with reflected light. A sudden sweep of its tail sends a low vibration through the water, rattling through your chest. It circles slowly, not hunting but surveying, as if deciding whether you belong in this world at all. When it finally turns away, the pressure it leaves behind feels like the ocean itself breathing out. Below, the dim landscape of the seafloor comes into view, a sprawling plain of sand broken by jagged ridges and yawning chasms. Across it moves a creature whose limbs seem impossibly long, jointed and segmented like some great machine. Each step sends a cloud of silt curling upward, its many appendages working in perfect unison. Its body is encased in a thick, ridged shell, each plate overlapping the next in an unbroken suit of armor. From its forward edge, two massive claws extend, moving with slow, precise intention, each capable of closing with a force that could crush stone. Tiny scavengers scatter in its path, fleeing into the cracks and shadows. Yet the creature does not hurry. It navigates the terrain as if it has walked this seafloor since before the shape of the continents above was known. And in the quiet that follows its passing, the silt drifts back down, covering its tracks as though it had never been there at all. The darkness around you begins to shift, a slow rotation of water that feels like the turning of an unseen wheel. Then it comes, a great body twisting through the gloom, its skin patterned with stripes that seem to shimmer and change as it moves. Its head narrows to a point, with jaws lined in teeth that curve inward like hooked blades, perfect for holding on to anything unfortunate enough to be caught. With each roll of its body, the stripes ripple like waves across its skin, breaking and reforming in hypnotic patterns. You feel the pull of its movement, the way the ocean bends toward it, as if the water itself wants to follow. Smaller creatures dart away in sudden bursts, their flight barely acknowledged by the giant predator. It moves on, coiling gracefully into the shadows, its stripes fading into the deep until there is no trace left, only the slow return of stillness. A pale gleam rises from the abyss below, growing brighter until it reveals a vast, armored head breaking upward through the gloom. Its mouth opens in slow motion, a cavern of bone and shadow, before closing with a soundless finality that sends a shiver through the water. The body behind it is massive, covered in thick plates that overlap like the scales of some impossible dragon. It moves with a steady rhythm, each beat of its tail pushing it higher, closer to where the light begins to fade into the blue above. Around it, schools of fish spiral and scatter, their patterns disrupted by the giant's ascent. It breaks through a patch of brighter water, revealing the full detail of its armor, scratches, deep grooves, and ridges that tell of battles fought and survived in the ancient sea. Then, with a tilt of its head, it dives again, vanishing into the same darkness it rose from. Far ahead, a slow-moving shadow seems fixed in place, though the water flows steadily past. As you approach, the scale of it becomes clear, a body so vast it blots out the dim shimmer of the surface above. Its back rises in gentle curves, like rolling hills in a drowned landscape. Along its spine, ridged fins protrude, each one taller than you, swaying slightly in the current. It moves with the patience of something that can afford to wait centuries for change. The water around it feels different, calmer, thicker, as though drawn toward the bulk of its form. As you drift closer, you catch the slow flex of its gills, the deep intake of water that sustains its massive frame. It neither flees nor approaches, content to exist here, unmoving, except for the subtle rhythm of life itself. When it finally shifts, turning its head away, the entire world seems to tilt with it, and the ocean once again begins to flow. The ocean opens into an expanse so vast it feels as though you are drifting across another planet. The water here is darker, heavier, pressing in on all sides, as if guarding the secrets below. From the shadows, a faint glimmer begins to grow, not a burst of light, but a slow, pulsing shimmer, like the reflection of a distant storm on calm water. As it swells, the shape behind it takes form, a colossal body, thick and barrel-like, with a hide patterned in subtle streaks of silver and deep blue. Its size is almost impossible to grasp. The curve of its flank alone would take minutes to drift past. It moves at a pace so unhurried, it could almost be mistaken for stillness, yet every sweep of its tail sends a surge through the water that rocks you gently. Along its sides, parasitic shapes cling to its skin, feeding on the scraps of its life, each one the size of a modern-day predator in its own right. The giant passes close enough for you to see the texture of its hide, a map of scars and ridges, each telling a story you will never hear. It moves on without sound, leaving only the vastness of the sea and the hollow realization that something this large can vanish, as though it was never there. Ahead, the gloom breaks into a faint clearing, where beams of filtered light drift down like slow-moving curtains. Suspended in that pale glow is a shape so immense it seems to distort the water around it. The creature's head is broad and flattened, its jaw sweeping wide in a curve that could envelop entire schools of fish. As it turns, the faint shimmer of its eyes catches your gaze, not curious, not hostile, simply aware. The light reveals its body in pieces. First, the vast pectoral fins, each beating once every few seconds with the weight of a collapsing wave. Then the rolling arch of its back, trailing into a tail that vanishes into darkness. Around its bulk, smaller creatures linger close, darting in and out like satellites orbiting a moving world. They feed on drifting particles stirred by the giant's motion, never straying too far from the safety its presence offers. The creature glides without altering its course, the soft hum of water over its body fading as it moves away. Yet even as the light dims and the shadows close again, the memory of its scale hangs in the water, a reminder that here, the sea does not measure life in anything smaller than the vast. The current shifts, carrying with it the faint sound of movement far beyond sight. It is a low, rhythmic thrum, more felt than heard, resonating through the water like the beating of a distant drum. Gradually the source reveals itself, a creature whose form is long and narrow, its scales gleaming like hammered bronze in the fractured light. Each ripple of its body moves with precision, bending the water as if it were no more than silk. Its head is sleek, tapering into a mouth lined with rows of needle-like teeth that shimmer briefly before being hidden again. As it draws closer, The surrounding water cools, the temperature dropping with every beat of its long tail. Smaller life scatters ahead of it, vanishing into the cracks and folds of the seafloor. The giant sways slightly as it passes, the edges of its fins cutting faint trails through the water, leaving glowing plankton swirling in its wake. You feel the pull of the current it creates, the way the ocean seems to follow after it, as though acknowledging a power too old to question. Long after it disappears, the thrum still echoes faintly in the water, marking the path it carved through the silent deep. The seafloor drops away beneath you, revealing a trench that swallows the dim light entirely. The walls are jagged, streaked with pale mineral deposits that shimmer faintly in the darkness. From within that void, a slow movement begins. First the sway of a massive tail, then the emergence of a head crowned with bony ridges. The creature rises from the depths, like a shadow pulling itself free from the seabed, its eyes reflecting the faintest glint of light. Its body is thick, armored in overlapping plates that scrape faintly as they shift with each motion. Around its mouth, strands of fleshy tendrils drift, twitching as they sense the water. It hovers for a moment at the trench's edge, as though considering whether to ascend further, and then with one powerful thrust of its tail, it pushes upward. The water surges around you, pulling you slightly toward the abyss, before the pressure steadies again. The giant disappears into the darker layers above, and the trench below falls silent once more, yet the sense of being watched from that black hollow never truly fades. A shimmer of pale blue moves in the distance, weaving gently through the dark, like a ribbon caught in an unseen current. As it draws closer, the light resolves into rows of glowing nodules along the sides of a massive, elongated body. Each flicker seems deliberate, a coded pulse that ripples the length of its form. Its head is wide, with jaws that hinge open slowly, revealing an interior lined with countless needle-like teeth. The creature moves with measured grace, its fins fluttering softly, carrying it in a lazy spiral through the water. Schools of tiny bioluminescent fish orbit it, scattering and regrouping in response to its shifting lights. Occasionally, the giant tilts its body to one side, sending a wave of pale blue radiance across its surface, lighting the surrounding water for an instant before fading back to black. As it passes overhead, the glow reflects off your skin and gear, briefly pulling you into its silent conversation of light, one that has likely been spoken here for millions of years without a single witness to record it. The water ahead trembles faintly, carrying the pulse of something vast, approaching. At first, only the faint distortion of the current gives it away, the feeling of the ocean bending to make way. Then a massive silhouette slides into view, long and sinuous, its back lined with tall serrated fins that cut the water like blades. Its movement is steady, but the muscles beneath its skin ripple with coiled strength, promising sudden bursts of speed should the need arise. It circles a patch of open water, each slow turn tightening the spiral, as though herding something unseen toward the center. You catch a glimpse of its head, sleek and pointed, with eyes that gleam like molten gold in the dim light. In a single smooth motion, it dips downward and vanishes into the blackness below, leaving the water eerily still. Only the faint shimmer of disturbed plankton remains, marking the space where moments ago, one of the sea's ancient rulers passed without a sound. From above, a shape descends, blocking what little light filters through the water. Its body is massive and flat, stretching wide on either side like the wings of some impossible bird. The edges of those wings curve upward slightly, catching the water in a slow gliding motion. As it passes overhead, the vast mouth opens, not to attack, but to filter the water, drawing in clouds of tiny creatures invisible in the darkness, until now. Along its underside, pale patterns shift and shimmer as faint light dances over the ripples of its skin. Shadows gather beneath its enormous form, giving the sense of being caught under a drifting island. Even the predators of this deep keep their distance, moving far aside as the giant glides through. The water stirs softly in its wake, carrying the faint scent of the plankton-rich current it has disturbed, before stillness returns, as if it was never there. The seafloor rises again into jagged ridges, each peak draped in drifting clouds of sediment. Between them, something vast stirs, not quick or sudden, but in a slow, deliberate unfurling of movement. At first, only the tip of a massive fin emerges, its edge notched like the spine of a weathered blade. Then the rest of the body follows, armored in thick, overlapping scales that glint faintly in the gloom. Each scale is the size of a human chest, their surfaces scarred from ancient battles. The creature winds its way between the ridges, tail sweeping in slow arcs that send ripples through the silt. It pauses briefly at the edge of a drop-off, its head lowering to examine something on the seafloor, a cluster of shells crushed and scattered. With a gentle push, it moves on, disappearing behind a ridge. Yet the water continues to shift, carrying the ghost of its passage long after its form is gone, as if the ocean is reluctant to let the giant fully vanish. A wall of darkness approaches, solid and unbroken, until you realize it is not the seafloor rising, but the flank of an animal. Its surface is rough and ridged, covered in growths of barnacles and strips of pale algae that clings stubbornly to its hide. The sheer size is staggering. Your eyes can't take in its entire body at once. Slowly, a vast flipper sweeps outward, bending the water with its motion, followed by the slow arc of a tail that trails far into the gloom. The giant's movement is unhurried, each stroke measured as though it has an eternity to cross these depths. Smaller fish ride in the currents it creates, darting in and out of its shadow to feed on the stirred sediment. The animal passes close enough for you to see deep grooves etched into its skin, some old and healed, others newer and raw. It moves on without a sound, fading back into the dark, leaving the seafloor silent once more. From the distance, a faint line of light flickers erratically, rising and falling like a ghostly signal. As you approach, the source becomes clear, a colossal creature trailing luminous tendrils behind it, each one swaying gently in the current. The tendrils stretch for many body lengths, glowing softly at their tips, attracting schools of small darting fish. Its body is long and muscular, with a sheen like wet stone, and its head is crowned by a pair of broad fins that fan outward as it moves. The light from the tendrils swirls across its body, creating shifting patterns that pulse and fade with each slow beat of its tail. It turns slightly, revealing a mouth that curves into a near-perfect crescent, lined with rows of fine hook-shaped teeth. The creature glides past without haste, the tips of its tendrils brushing the water near you before sweeping away. In its wake, the glow lingers for a moment, suspended in the dark, then fades entirely as the giant disappears into the abyss. The current changes direction, pulling you toward a soundless commotion ahead. Tiny specks of debris drift past, disturbed sediment, fragments of shells, and the silvery flash of startled fish. Then the source appears, a broad, triangular head breaking through the haze, its jaws opening just wide enough to reveal a glint of teeth within. Its eyes are narrow, scanning the water ahead, with unhurried precision. The rest of its body follows, a thick, muscular frame built for endurance. Its skin a mottled mix of dark and pale patches that break up its outline. It swims in a steady, almost mechanical rhythm, its movements perfectly matched to the slow beat of the deep. Occasionally its head tilts slightly, sensing vibrations in the water, before returning to its course. As it passes, the pressure shifts again, pushing you gently aside. Even after it fades into the gloom, the water retains a subtle tremor, as though the memory of its passage still pulses through the deep. From below, a shadow begins to rise, wide and rounded, its edges rippling in the current. As it nears, the full breadth of its body becomes clear, a massive disc-shaped form, with an underside pale and ghostly in the dim light. Its mouth stretches nearly the full width of its body, opening and closing in slow, steady cycles, as it filters vast volumes of water for the life too small for you to see. The tips of its wings curve upward slightly, catching currents that allow it to drift effortlessly without flapping. Around it, dozens of smaller fish trail in its wake, darting in close to snatch whatever escapes the giant's filtering sweep. The water around you grows cooler as the shadow passes overhead, blocking what little light filters down. Then, with a slow shift of its wings, it banks away, disappearing into the dark until only the soft push of displaced water remains. In the distance, something stirs along the seafloor, a shape so large it could be mistaken for part of the landscape. It remains still for long moments, blending into its surroundings with uncanny perfection. Then, with a sudden shift, a pair of massive fins spread outward, lifting the body free of the sand in a clouded plume. The creature's skin is textured like rough stone, patterned in irregular blotches that break its outline. It moves forward in slow, sweeping motions, its fins rippling gently as it glides over the seabed. The motion stirs up small crustaceans that scatter in a frantic burst, but the giant does not chase. Instead, it moves steadily on, mouth opening just wide enough to draw in the drifting life the water offers. As it passes over a ridge, it fades again into stillness, vanishing into the shadows as though the ocean itself has reclaimed it. A distant movement catches your eye, a low, undulating shape, sweeping back and forth in long, graceful arcs. As it draws nearer, you see the outline of a tail, longer than most entire animals, its edges tipped with fine, trailing filaments. The body attached to it is immense, tapering toward the head in a streamlined shape, built for both power and endurance. Its skin glistens faintly, broken by faint ridges that run from the base of its head to the tip of its tail. The creature's eyes are set deep, unblinking as they scan the water around it. With each slow sweep of its tail, the pressure shifts, sending a faint rolling wave through the current. As it passes, the filaments trailing from its tail drift toward you, like strands of silk, then slip away as the giant glides back into the dark. Above, a flicker of shadow moves through the water, breaking the dim light into shifting bands. Slowly, the form takes shape, a wide, muscular body, with a back lined in sharp ridges, each one catching the light like polished stone. Its head is broad, with a mouth that curves into a downward arc, teeth flashing briefly as it adjusts its course. It moves with quiet certainty, every motion conserving energy, while covering vast distances with ease. The water carries a faint scent of iron in its wake, mingling with the deeper, salt-heavy smell of the abyss. Small fish scatter in every direction as it passes overhead, their movements a frantic shimmer against the calm glide of the giant. Then, without warning, it banks sharply and disappears into the shadows, leaving only the memory of its ridged back and the slow pulse of the deep. The deep ahead grows darker still, the water dense enough to feel like it clings to your skin. Tiny particles drift slowly, catching faint glints of light as they fall into the endless black. Then, without warning, a massive silhouette sweeps across your vision, not in a rush, but with the patient rhythm of something that has ruled these depths for eons. The first thing you see is the vast curve of its flank, each scale a glistening plate etched with pale streaks. As it turns, the dim light grazes its head, revealing jaws that open and close with unhurried precision, teeth like pale ivory lining their edges. The creature drifts closer, and the surrounding water shifts, pulling you slightly toward its bulk before releasing you again. Behind it trails a procession of smaller creatures, each feeding on fragments stirred loose by its passage. It does not acknowledge them, nor you, its focus fixed on some distant point beyond sight. When it finally moves on, the pressure in the water eases, yet the shadow it casts lingers in your vision, as though the sea itself remembers the shape of its passing. Far below, the seafloor is broken by jagged towers of rock, each crowned with swaying gardens of pale, feathery life. Between them, a shadow moves, long, broad, and impossibly smooth, gliding just above the sand. At first it blends perfectly with the stone, its mottled skin mirroring the darkness around it. Then its vast pectoral fins lift slightly, revealing a lighter underside as it banks into a slow, sweeping turn. The motion stirs up a haze of sediment that drifts like smoke, curling in the wake of its passing. As it approaches a cluster of smaller fish, the giant does not lunge, it simply opens its mouth, drawing in an entire cloud of them in one silent pull. The water churns briefly as the prey vanishes inside, and then it glides on, its fins brushing the edges of the rocky towers. When it disappears beyond them, the feathery gardens resume their gentle sway, as though nothing had disturbed this ancient place. Yet the echo of movement still hums faintly through the water. The water ahead begins to shimmer, disturbed by a rhythm too steady to be the tide. Soon the source emerges, a creature of staggering length, its body undulating like a river of muscle, each wave rippling from head to tail. Along its flanks, a series of bioluminescent spots blink in slow succession, their glow shifting through shades of pale green and deep blue. They flicker in patterns, perhaps a signal to others of its kind, though none are visible in this expanse. Its head narrows into a pointed snout, lined with fine, sharp teeth, each glinting faintly as it turns. The giant sways to one side, circling you slowly, the current from its motion brushing against your skin in cool, steady pulses. Around it, tiny organisms glow briefly before fading into the dark, caught in the turbulence of its passing. Without warning, the creature tilts downward, its body curling into a slow dive, and it slips into the deep until only the faint trail of its blinking lights remains. A final signature in the black before even that fades away. The faint glow of drifting plankton hangs in the water like a curtain of falling stars. You drift through it slowly, each movement sending lazy swirls through the haze. Ahead, a darker mass interrupts the glow, a creature so broad it seems at first to be part of the seafloor rising toward you. Its head is wide and angular, the skin patterned in irregular, mottled shades that break its outline in the dim light. Two massive eyes catch the glow of the plankton, shining with a cold, glassy brilliance that doesn't blink. It moves forward with the steadiness of a drifting landmass, its immense mouth opening just enough to reveal the first row of teeth, before closing again with soundless precision. As it passes close, you see faint scars running along its side, pale lines where the skin has healed over deep gouges, reminders of battles fought in the unseen dark. The water bends around its body, drawing you gently toward its path, before releasing you into stillness again. When it finally disappears beyond the curtain of plankton, the glowing haze folds back together as though nothing had ever passed through, hiding the memory of its vast presence. The terrain below becomes uneven, scattered with rocky mounds and channels etched by ancient currents. From one of these channels, a long ridged form emerges, moving with slow, deliberate strength. Its armor-like scales glint faintly, catching flashes of dim light as it glides closer. The creature's head is low and narrow, sweeping back into a neck that arches gracefully before merging into the bulk of its body. Along its sides, powerful fins beat in slow, measured strokes, each one sending a deep pulse through the water that you feel in your chest. It passes close to a rocky outcrop, and the smaller creatures clinging there vanish instantly into crevices, sensing the danger long before you do. The giant turns slightly, revealing the vast sweep of its tail, which moves in a steady rhythm like the ticking of a clock. Even after it disappears into the haze, you can still feel the faint rhythmic push of its passing against your skin, as though the deep itself has not yet adjusted to its absence. Above you, the gloom brightens for just a moment, not from sunlight, but from the ghostly glow of thousands of small drifting organisms moving as one. Their light reflects off the smooth, sweeping curve of something enormous, passing silently overhead. Its body is wide and flat, the edges of its form tapering into long, graceful wings that stretch far into the darkness on either side. As it glides, it catches a current that carries it upward in a slow, spiraling ascent. The underside is pale and patterned, a canvas of shifting light, as the bioluminescence washes over it. At intervals, its wide mouth opens, drawing in water thick with life, then closes again without a sound. Around its edges, the faint shapes of smaller fish dart in and out of the giant's slipstream, feeding on the leftovers of its feast. The wings tilt slightly, and with a gentle push, it banks away, vanishing into the dark like a drifting shadow, leaving only the faint sparkle of disturbed plankton behind. The water grows colder, each breath sharp in your chest, as the current pulls you toward an open plain of sand. From far ahead, a moving shape begins to take form. A long, low body that glides just above the seafloor, its skin blending perfectly with the pale sediment beneath. As it draws closer, the outline sharpens, and you see the sweep of powerful fins set far back on its body. Its head is broad and heavy, with eyes set deep under a ridged brow, giving it the expression of a patient, ancient sentinel. It moves with unhurried purpose, each push of its tail sending a rolling pulse through the sand below. Occasionally its mouth opens slightly, revealing teeth curved inward like hooked spears, then closes again as it continues its path. Small creatures scatter from its shadow, vanishing into the sand, but the giant pays them no mind. It passes, and the cold lingers in its wake, as though the deep itself has followed along behind it. The plain of sand ahead breaks suddenly into a jagged field of stone, each outcrop rising like the spine of a buried mountain. Between these ridges, the water stirs in slow circular patterns, as though something massive has passed through moments ago. Then it appears, a vast body sliding into view, its movement so smooth it seems the water bends around it. The creature's sides are marked with faint, swirling patterns that ripple when it shifts, almost like camouflage alive on its skin. As it glides between the stones, its broad head sweeps gently from side to side, sensing vibrations in the water. From its mouth, thin strands trail outward, drifting lazily before curling back. The sheer width of its body forces smaller fish to scatter, seeking shelter deep within the rocky crevices. It moves on without changing pace, tail sweeping in deep, slow arcs. Even after it vanishes into the haze, the disturbed water clings to the stone, trembling faintly as if remembering the weight of its passing. The current grows stronger, carrying with it a low, steady hum that resonates in your chest. The sound deepens as a long shadow emerges from the gloom, its body moving in an undulating rhythm that sends waves of pressure outward. Along its back, a row of tall, sharp fins slices the water, each tip gleaming briefly in the dim light. Its head is sleek and narrow, built for cutting through the ocean with minimal effort. As it approaches, the water bends noticeably, pulling smaller creatures into its wake. You catch sight of its eyes, deep, unblinking pools that seem to register everything without reacting. The giant sweeps past, the tips of its fins leaving faint trails of turbulence that swirl around you before fading into the stillness. The hum lingers long after it is gone, a low vibration that makes it feel as if the sea itself has taken a slow, deliberate breath. From above, something drifts downward, blocking what little light filters from the far-off surface. At first it seems like debris, but as it nears, the outline sharpens into an immense, disc-shaped body with edges that ripple slightly in the current. The underside is pale, patterned with ghostly shapes that seem to shift as it moves. The creature drifts closer to the seafloor, passing over coral-encrusted ridges and sandy valleys without altering its course. Every so often, it tilts its massive wings, catching a rising current that lifts it effortlessly before settling back into its glide. Smaller fish follow in clusters beneath its body, darting upward to feed on the scraps released in its wake. You drift beneath it as it passes, the shadow blotting out everything above for long moments. When it finally tilts and banks away, the light slowly returns, but the sensation of being beneath something so vast and silent lingers like a weight in the water. The darkness thickens ahead, pierced only by the flicker of pale light, reflecting off moving scales. As you draw closer, a shape begins to take form, a long, muscular body, twisting in slow coils, each motion revealing a new stretch of its ridged skin. Its head is narrow and angular, ending in a jaw lined with teeth that flash briefly before vanishing into shadow. The creature moves without urgency, winding its way through the open water, as if following an invisible trail. Occasionally it pauses mid-motion, fins quivering, before resuming its slow advance. Smaller life flees in scattered bursts, the shimmer of their bodies disappearing into the black. When it turns toward you, the glow catches its eye, reflecting a cold metallic gleam before it rolls away, diving slowly into the depths below. In its place, the water swirls softly, settling back into silence, as though nothing had passed at all. A faint disturbance in the distance grows into a swirl of plankton and drifting debris, as though stirred by a hidden current. Then the source appears, a massive body gliding at an angle, its path cutting slowly upward through the water. The creature's sides shimmer faintly with reflected light, revealing scars that trace pale lines across its skin. Its mouth opens wide as it ascends, pulling in vast volumes of water, before closing with a slow, heavy finality. Around it, small fish dart toward the cloud of stirred particles, only to scatter when the giant's tail sweeps past in a single, measured stroke. The angle of its ascent carries it higher into the dim blue above, where the light catches along the curve of its back before it fades into the distance. For long moments afterward, the disturbed plankton hangs suspended, slowly drifting back into stillness, as though reluctant to settle after such a presence has passed. The sea floor ahead is littered with broken shells, scattered in a wide arc, as if some massive feeding had taken place here. At the center of this quiet graveyard, a shadow moves, slow, deliberate, and heavy with the weight of unseen muscle. Its head is broad and wedge-shaped, sweeping from side to side with each measured stroke of its fins. Along its body, thick ridges rise and fall, giving it an armored appearance. As it passes, you notice faint markings along its skin, long, shallow grooves that might be the scars of encounters with other giants. The creature drifts over the shell-strewn sand, stirring the fragments into the water, where they flash briefly before sinking again. It moves on without pause, disappearing into the darker water beyond. The silence that follows feels heavier here, as if the ghosts of its past hunts still linger in the cold current. A broad, pale shape rises from the haze, gliding just below the edge of visibility. As it nears, its full size becomes apparent. A body so wide it could block your entire view, framed by long, tapering fins that move in slow, graceful sweeps. The creature's mouth opens into a vast, dark void that swallows the surrounding water before closing with the quiet ease of something that has repeated the motion for countless lifetimes. Around its form, dozens of smaller animals move in a synchronized dance, feeding on whatever escapes the giant's capture. The water feels thick here, stirred into slow eddies by the creature's passing. When it banks to one side, its pale underside flashes briefly before fading back into shadow. The current it leaves behind pushes softly at you, carrying with it the faint scent of salt and the unmeasurable weight of something older than memory. Far ahead, a glimmer of light wavers in the dark, drawing your attention until it resolves into the reflective scales of an immense predator. Its movement is slow, almost lazy, but there is a tension in the way its body ripples that speaks of coiled strength. The head is long, the jaws lined with teeth that catch the dim light as it opens its mouth in a slow, deliberate motion before closing again. Along its back, faint ridges rise like the peaks of a submerged mountain range. Smaller creatures flee at the faintest shift of its path, scattering into the dark before the predator even nears them. It passes close enough for you to feel the pressure of its movement, a rolling wave that pushes against you before sliding past. Then, without warning, it tilts downward, tail sweeping wide, and vanishes into the deep, leaving only the fading shimmer of disturbed particles behind. The water ahead grows darker, not in a sudden drop of light, but in a slow deepening, as though every movement forward takes you further from the reach of the living world above. The faint scatter of plankton begins to thin, replaced by drifting particles of silt and fragments of shell that move lazily with the current. The silence here is almost absolute, broken only by the soft hiss of water slipping past your ears. You sense it before you see it, a subtle change in the flow, a pull that tugs ever so slightly in one direction, as though the ocean itself is shifting to make way for something vast. From the haze a shape emerges, its boundaries blurred at first, too large for your eyes to take in all at once. A slow beat of its tail sends a deep wave of pressure through the water, rocking you gently in its wake. As it draws nearer, the details sharpen, skin textured like weathered stone, mottled in pale greys and dark streaks, each mark a record of survival in a world that demands resilience above all else. Its head is broad and low, the eyes set deep beneath heavy ridges that shadow them from the faint light. The mouth is closed for now, but even so you can see the strength in its jaw, the hint of ivory teeth behind lips that curve into no expression at all, just the calm certainty of an apex presence. It passes slowly, the length of its flank stretching on far beyond what you expect, scale after scale, catching the dim light and vanishing again into shadow. Along its back, small ridges rise like the worn spines of a forgotten mountain range, breaking the smooth sweep of muscle beneath. A pair of remoras cling stubbornly to its side, their bodies swaying with the giant's movement, feeding on whatever fragments of life are stirred from its skin. You drift in its shadow for long moments, close enough to feel the gentle sway of its weight tugging at you. The water here feels heavier, as though thickened by the sheer presence of the creature, every current bending to its slow command. It does not acknowledge you, nor any of the smaller life darting to avoid its path. Its gaze remains forward, fixed on some point deep in the unseen dark. As it moves on, the pull lessens, replaced by the slow return of stillness. Yet that stillness feels altered, stretched, as though something immense has passed through and changed the shape of the water behind it. In the fading distance, the shadow narrows, the beat of the tail becoming a softer and softer pulse, until even that is gone. All that remains is the lingering pressure in your chest, and the impression that this was not a chance meeting. The ocean allowed you to drift in its presence for a time, and now, as the darkness folds in again, you move forward into waters that feel somehow older than before. The seafloor stretches away in every direction, a pale desert of fine, rippled sand, where the current's hand has traced its endless patterns. It seems barren at first glance, a still and silent expanse. But the longer you watch, the more you notice the subtle motions, the slow undulation of a distant frond-like sponge, the flicker of a shadow that disappears into a shallow depression. The water here is colder, the temperature drop a creeping reminder that you are moving further into a realm where light and warmth hold no sway. Then the first sign comes, a tremor in the water, faint but steady, like the distant beat of a great drum. It repeats, deep and resonant, each pulse slightly stronger than the last, carrying through the sand and into your bones. Soon the source begins to take shape on the horizon, a vast domed shadow sliding across the seabed. At first it could be mistaken for a drifting boulder, but as it approaches, the illusion breaks. The creature's back is covered in thick, overlapping plates, each one marked by pale scratches and gouges that tell of collisions, perhaps with rivals or other unseen giants. These armored ridges catch the dim light in dull flashes as the giant moves, slow but inexorable. Its head emerges from beneath the dome of its shell-like back, small compared to its bulk, yet framed by bony flanges that flare outward, like the supports of a fortress gate. The mouth remains closed, but the strength it holds is evident in the lines of its jaw, built for crushing through defenses that lesser predators would never attempt to breach. It advances steadily, each powerful sweep of its fins sending plumes of sand spiraling upward. The clouds twist and shimmer in the dim water, curling around the creature before being left behind in drifting trails. As it moves, smaller fish dart into its shadow, sheltering in the calm water that flows just beneath its massive form. A few bold scavengers hitch rides along its armored back, grazing on the algae that grows in the grooves between plates. The giant ignores them entirely, its gaze fixed on the seafloor ahead. As it draws alongside you, the pressure of its passage is like the slow shifting of the earth itself. Your body rocks gently, caught in the undertow of its momentum. Then, as quickly as it arrived, the giant begins to angle away, turning its bulk toward a low ridge in the distance. Its fins sweep in wide arcs, pushing it forward with the same patient rhythm it has likely kept for centuries. The vibrations fade, replaced once again by the hush of the cold water. You watch until its armored back vanishes over the rise, leaving only the drifting remnants of disturbed sand as proof that it passed this way at all. The darkness above is fractured by a strange shifting light, like the shimmer of moonlight scattered over rippled glass. It takes a moment to realize that it isn't coming from the surface at all. It's drifting toward you from somewhere ahead, a slow-moving curtain of bioluminescence suspended in the water. Thousands of tiny organisms float together in a dense cloud, each emitting its own faint glow, pulsing in a rhythm that feels almost alive. The glow sways and undulates with the current, turning the cold water into an otherworldly haze of pale blue and green. You move closer, drawn to the strange beauty of the scene, but then the light bends, twisting unnaturally as if something massive is sliding through it. The silhouette forms gradually, not in sharp lines but in the gradual interruption of the glowing haze. Long wings extend outward, tapering into elegant points, their movements slow and deliberate. With each sweep, they send spirals of bioluminescent life scattering away, tumbling like galaxies thrown off their axis. The creature's body glides effortlessly between these luminous clouds. Its upper surface is dark, blending almost perfectly into the surrounding water, while its underside reflects the glow of the drifting plankton, transforming it into a moving sheet of light. As it passes directly beneath one of the densest clusters, its wide mouth opens, not in a sudden strike, but in an unbroken, steady motion. Water floods in, carrying with it countless drifting organisms. The motion is so fluid, it doesn't seem to disturb the balance of the surrounding water. The prey vanish without resistance, drawn into the vast cavern of its throat. Following in its wake are smaller fish, opportunistic feeders that dart in to claim whatever escapes. They weave close to its flanks, and then veer sharply away when its great tail sweeps, sending a slow, powerful push of current through the water. The tail is thick at its base, narrowing gracefully into a long, flexible tip that flicks just enough to steer the giant's path without breaking its glide. As the creature banks slightly to one side, the tip of one wing catches the densest part of the glowing curtain. The bioluminescence flares briefly, exploding into a spiral of shimmering debris that drifts lazily back into place after the giant has passed. The light it disturbed hangs in the water for a long time afterward, slowly knitting itself back together like a living tapestry mending in the dark. By the time the glow resumes its gentle pulse, the silhouette is already fading into the distance, wings outstretched, body melting once again into shadow. The curtain of light sways back into place behind it, as if guarding the path it took. The silence returns, but it carries a different weight now, the stillness of a space that has just been visited by something too immense to fully comprehend, leaving behind only a memory etched in shifting light. The open expanse begins to narrow, the seafloor rising into sheer walls of stone that stretch upward into the dark, like the columns of some vast, drowned cathedral. Their surfaces are draped in ghostly growths, pale, feathery corals that sway gently with the slow pulse of the current. You drift between them, the water here heavier and stiller, the sound dampened until even the soft hiss of your breath feels loud. The passage twists and bends, guiding you deeper into its shadowed corridors. A subtle movement catches your eye, not the dart of small life, but the slow, deliberate ripple of something much larger. At first it's no more than a shift in the water, but then a long head emerges from a side crevice, its narrow snout and ridged skull etched in the dim light. The eyes are black and unblinking, set far forward in a face built for precision and patience. It glides forward, revealing a body that coils through the water like a ribbon of living muscle, each undulation perfectly controlled. The fins are small, almost secondary to the long, sinuous movements of its torso, yet every sweep of that body pushes it forward with silent authority. The creature navigates the maze of stone as if it knows every turn, slipping between narrow openings with a grace that belies its size. Its flanks brush close to the rock walls, sending faint spirals of silt drifting upward before settling again. You follow its path, careful to keep your distance, and watch as it weaves between the pillars, occasionally pausing in shadow before moving on. It is then you notice that the passage is not empty. Far ahead, another shadow moves, similar in shape but smaller, weaving toward the larger one. The two approach without haste, circling each other once, twice, as if exchanging some silent acknowledgement. Then, in unison, they drift deeper into the cathedral-like space, their movements so closely matched it's as if they are reflections of one another. The walls narrow further, until they pass through a final gap, vanishing into a vast chamber beyond. You follow at the edge of the opening and see them silhouetted against the faint glow of water pouring in from above, their bodies spiraling upward together in slow mirrored arcs. The scene is so quiet, so deliberate, that it feels almost ceremonial. An ancient dance played out in a place no light has touched for uncountable ages. Eventually the pair tilt away, their long tails vanishing into the far shadows. The chamber grows still again, the only movement the soft sway of the corals along the stone. The sense of scale here lingers, not just the size of the creatures, but the enormity of the space they inhabit, a realm built on patience, shadow, and the slow persistence of time. As you turn to leave the stone corridors, the water seems to close behind you, sealing the memory of what you've seen deep within the walls of this silent, sunken world. The cathedral-like stone walls fall away behind you, and the water opens into a vast plain so immense that it feels as though you've drifted into a realm without boundaries. The light here is dimmer than anywhere before, not because of depth alone, but because the water carries with it a constant haze, an endless drift of fine sediment, stirred by unseen movements far beyond your sight. The stillness is deceptive. Every so often the current will shift ever so slightly, hinting at the silent passage of something enormous through this place. Far ahead, a shadow begins to take form. At first it's just a distortion, a bend in the water where light and dark meet and do not align. Then it grows, the outline sharpening into a bulk so massive it dwarfs the landscape behind it. The creature's body is thick and muscular, the surface of its skin uneven with ridges and faint depressions, a topography in itself. Faint scars cut across its flank, long pale lines that speak of encounters not survived by the ones who made them. Its approach is slow, patient, and unshakable. With every beat of its enormous tail, the water around you shifts in a deep rolling wave that pushes against your body before drawing you gently forward again. Its head is wide, the eyes small compared to its size yet heavy with an unblinking awareness. The mouth stays closed as it passes over a loose school of smaller fish, showing no interest in the easy meal. This is not a predator that wastes its energy on scraps. It moves with the kind of confidence that comes from having nothing in these waters to fear. You drift lower to the seafloor, letting the sand rise in faint spirals as the giant's shadow rolls over you. In its wake, smaller creatures follow closely, scavengers, feeders, and riders that have evolved to live their lives in the calm slipstream of its passing. Some cling directly to its skin, their shapes barely visible against the textured ridges. Others dart in and out, catching bits of matter disturbed from the sand below. The giant moves past without changing its course, the push of water in its passing lifting you gently upward before settling you back into the plain. Even as it fades into the haze ahead, the after effects of its movement linger in the currents, subtle sways and ripples that refuse to die away quickly. You realize that if you closed your eyes you could follow its trail for miles simply by feeling the water's pulse. Far in the distance, the haze closes around it completely, erasing the last visible trace of its form. But the knowledge of its passing remains, not just in the altered rhythm of the water but in the heaviness of the plain itself, as though this space has been shaped over centuries by such giants gliding in their endless migrations. You continue onward, the plain stretching ahead without end, knowing that somewhere within its shifting haze, more shadows are already moving. The plain of sand begins to slope gently downward, the fine grains giving way to a patchwork of darker sediment and scattered debris. Here and there, the remains of long-forgotten shells lie half-buried, their surfaces softened by time and the endless grinding of the current. You drift low over them, the water cool and heavy, when the first subtle sign arrives, not in sight, but in sound. A low rhythmic pulse rolls through the deep, so faint at first that you wonder if it's only your heartbeat echoing inside your head. But it grows, steady and deliberate, a deep percussion that you feel in your bones more than you hear with your ears. The haze ahead shifts. Something vast is moving through it, shaping the water in slow, rolling waves. The shadow takes form with unnerving patience, the sweep of an enormous flank, the rise of a dorsal ridge that breaks the creature's silhouette into jagged peaks. Its skin is rough and irregular, each scale catching faint hints of reflected light before vanishing again into shadow. Some are scarred or cracked, the healed remnants of encounters with others of its kind. The head appears last, framed by a heavy brow and eyes that gleam like polished stone. It does not approach directly, instead it arcs in a wide curve, letting its path carry it close without revealing its full size in a single glance. The curve of its tail swings in the opposite direction, pushing a deep surge of water through the plain, scattering clouds of sediment that drift upward like smoke. Smaller fish ride this sudden current, darting toward the giant's flanks, before slipping back into the safety of the disturbed sand. As it draws nearer, the pulse you felt earlier becomes stronger, resonating in the water around you. It isn't a vocal call, it's the rhythm of its movement, the deep, heavy beat of muscle and fine driving through the current. You drift alongside for a moment, the world narrowing to the cadence of that motion. Every sweep of its tail pushes you a little further forward, as though you are caught in a tide shaped entirely by this one creature. It turns slightly, and for a brief instant, you see its full length stretched before you, a living monument, moving with the same patient authority as the sea itself. Then it angles away again, vanishing into the descending slope ahead. The rhythmic pulse fades, replaced by the softer hiss of sand settling back to the plain. The silence that follows is not empty but full, holding the echo of the giant's passing as a kind of reminder. Here in the deep, scale and time are measured differently, and presence is remembered long after it is gone. The slope deepens until the plain disappears entirely, replaced by a gradual drop-off that leads into a basin so wide it feels like the hollow of the world. The water here is thicker, colder, and the light almost gone. Not darkness exactly, but a dim metallic blue that presses close around you. The sea floor is uneven, littered with boulders draped in thin layers of silt. Between them, narrow gullies cut deep into the basin floor, their edges soft from centuries of erosion. A tremor rolls through the water, not sudden, but heavy and slow, as if the deep itself has taken a breath. At first you see nothing, but then, emerging from the far side of the basin, the shadow takes form. It moves low to the seafloor, each powerful stroke of its fins displacing clouds of silt that rise and curl in the dim light. Its body is massive, broad through the middle, tapering into a tail that sweeps in wide, deliberate arcs. The dorsal ridge is uneven, some points tall and jagged, others worn and blunt, giving the impression of an old warrior, carrying the scars of long survival. The head swings slowly from side to side, the eyes deep set and unblinking. A pair of smaller shapes accompany it, scavenger fish riding just behind its pectoral fins, darting in occasionally to snatch bits of food stirred from the sand. They move with it like attendants to a sovereign, never straying far. As the giant draws closer, its presence fills the basin. The water bends subtly around it, the currents reshaping to follow its path. You drift in its wake, feeling the pull of its motion, the way it commands the space without a sound. Every now and then it lowers its head toward the sand, sending a puff of silt into the water before lifting again and gliding onward. It does not pass quickly. Instead it moves with a steady, unhurried pace, as though the basin belongs to it entirely, and time here is its own. Even after it angles upward toward the opposite rim, its shadow still hangs over you, and the water carries the faint warmth of its passing. The silence it leaves behind is deep, but not empty. It is a silence filled with the knowledge that you have just moved through the territory of something that could cross this basin 1,000 more times, and still leave it unchanged, except for the memory it has pressed into the currents. The far side of the basin rises steeply, the slope broken into ledges and overhangs where shadows gather, like drifting smoke. You move upward, along its face. The rock here darker and slick, with thin mats of algae that sway faintly in the slow current. Now and then, a faint flash of silver darts from one ledge to another, small fish seeking the shelter of cracks that run deep into the stone. The higher you go, the colder the water becomes, and the light shifts from its dim metallic blue to a heavier grey, as though the deep is pulling you back down even as you climb. From one of the shadowed overhangs, movement begins, slow, deliberate, and heavy. A head emerges first, long and narrow, with a jaw that curves into a subtle, predatory smile. Behind it follows the immense body, its upper surface patterned in mottled bands that shift with the light, making it seem at times like the rock itself is moving. The creature glides from its hiding place without hurry, each beat of its tail, a deep, rolling push of water that carries its entire length forward with effortless power. It does not travel in a straight path, but moves between ledges, slipping into the gaps as though inspecting them. You drift at a distance, watching it navigate its own labyrinth. At one point, it pauses, hovering just above a cluster of pale sponges. The head tilts slightly, the jaws opening a fraction before closing again in silence. It moves on, its passage stirring the sponges into a slow, trembling sway. As it rises higher along the slope, another figure emerges from the gloom below, smaller, leaner, but bearing the same slow confidence. It follows at a distance, never closing the gap completely. The two ascend in the same direction, their paths winding and weaving, but never far from one another. Whether this is companionship, competition, or some quiet ritual, you cannot tell. Eventually the leader reaches the crest of the slope, the body lengthening into a smooth horizontal glide. The smaller shape lingers near the last ledge, circling once before turning away into the deeper gloom. You watch the larger creature vanish over the rise, its tail sweeping one final time before the water stills. The only evidence of their presence is the faint stirring of the algae clinging to the rocks and the slow collapse of disturbed silt back to the basin floor far below. Here on the edge of the slope, the water feels vast again, the kind of space where anything might emerge from the haze without warning. You hover for a moment, the cold seeping deeper into your limbs, and then let the current carry you forward into the open, leaving behind the basin and its shadowed ledges for whatever lies in the next reach of the deep. The slope you've followed eases into a wide plateau, its surface broken by winding channels carved long ago by currents, far stronger than the ones here now. The water carries the faintest haze, enough to blur the edges of distant shapes, so that they appear and vanish with each slow shift of the light. The plateau is not empty. Its floor is scattered with low mounds of stone and coral, some built up over centuries into knotted spires where small fish hide in tightly woven schools. The stillness is deceptive. Somewhere beyond sight, the deep moves with a force you can feel in the subtle tug of the current. It begins as a shadow at the edge of perception, not a sudden arrival, but a gradual darkening, as though the water ahead is thickening. The first detail to emerge is the curve of an immense flank, the texture of its skin uneven, ridged like weathered rock. Then the head comes into view, broad and blunt, the eyes recessed beneath heavy ridges that keep their expression hidden. It does not rush. It doesn't need to. Every push of its massive tail sends a slow wave through the plateau, stirring the silt into soft clouds that drift lazily back to the ground. As it passes over one of the winding channels, the depth reveals the full reach of its body. Smaller fish scatter from the shadow it casts, disappearing into coral towers only to re-emerge when the danger has moved on. Clinging to its sides are pale, streamlined riders, their small fins working constantly to maintain their grip against the giant's slow, steady momentum. A pair of them dart away to feed in the stirred water, only to return quickly to their place against the giant's flanks. The creature's path takes it close enough for you to feel the pressure of its movement ripple against your body, a deep rolling pulse that lingers long after it passes. The texture of its skin is visible even at this distance, not smooth, but a patchwork of healed gouges, pale lines and roughened ridges that speak to its age and survival in a world where only the colossal endure. Without altering its pace, it begins to angle toward the far edge of the plateau, following the curve of a channel that bends away into the dark. The water feels emptier in its absence, as though the space it occupied has been hollowed out. You hover for a while, listening to the muted silence, before letting the current draw you onward. Somewhere ahead, the plateau will fall away again, and with it will come the possibility of another encounter, another glimpse of a life that moves through this world as effortlessly as the tide itself. The plateau begins to change beneath you, its once open stretches narrowing into winding valleys carved deep into the seafloor. The walls of these valleys rise steep and irregular, their surfaces cloaked in soft mats of pale growth that ripple with every passing shift of water. Faint trails of silt snake along the base of each wall, pulled from unseen depths by currents too slow to notice. Unless you stop and watch, the stillness here is heavier, as though this space lies beyond the reach of regular movement, a place where only the most deliberate of giants pass. A faint stirring ahead breaks that stillness. At first it's only the smallest suggestion of motion, a swirl in the sediment, a quiver in the drifting mats on the walls. Then, out of the gloom, the shape emerges. The first thing to appear is its head, wide and triangular, with a jawline that curves into the shadows like the prow of a great ship. The skin is marked with deep, irregular grooves, some fresh and sharp-edged, others faded and worn smooth by time. Slowly the rest of its form follows, a body built for endurance, thick through the middle, tapering into a powerful tail that sweeps with slow, heavy strokes. The creature moves within the valley as though the space were designed for it. Each beat of its tail sends a rolling push of water down the narrow passage, stirring up clouds of silt that momentarily obscure its flanks before settling again. Along its sides, smaller creatures drift close, drawn to the protection its size offers, only to dart away when the current tugs them too near its mouth. The giant pays them no mind, its gaze fixed ahead on the winding path that disappears into shadow. As it passes, you follow at a cautious distance, your path lit only by the dim light filtering down from the open water far above. The valley's twists hide it from view at times, but the slow thrum of its motion carries back to you in steady pulses, guiding your way. It never hurries, never alters its rhythm, as though it has traced this route countless times before. When it finally reaches a fork where the valley splits in two, it pauses, just long enough for the silt to settle, then turns down the darker of the two paths. Within moments it melts back into the shadow, leaving the valley still and cold once more, as though it had never been there. The darker valley slopes downward, the walls drawing closer until the space between them feels almost like a tunnel. Here, the water is cooler still, and the light is reduced to a dim haze in which every shape blends into another. Long strands of growth hang from the walls, swaying slowly like the roots of a sunken forest. You drift carefully through them, their pale fibers brushing against you in the faint current. Somewhere far ahead, a muffled tremor begins to spread through the water, slow, deliberate, and growing stronger with each passing moment. Then it arrives, a shape vast enough to fill the tunnel from wall to wall. The first sign is a blunt, armored head pushing through the gloom, the surface of its skin patterned with overlapping plates that catch and reflect fragments of light. Its body follows in long, measured segments, each ridge along its spine casting soft shadows over the next. The creature moves without hesitation, passing through the tight space with the ease of something perfectly at home here. As it draws level, you can see the width of its flank just feet away, every plate and groove worn by time yet unbroken. The sheer bulk of it is enough to alter the current, pulling you gently along in its slipstream. Smaller fish, perhaps accustomed to this path, cling to the shadows at the base of the walls until the giant has passed, then dart out to sift through the particles it has disturbed. You follow until the tunnel widens into a deep pocket where the walls fall back to reveal a cavernous chamber. The giant moves into the open space and circles once, the tip of its tail tracing a slow spiral in the silt before angling downward into another gap at the far end. In moments it is gone, leaving only the trembling strands of wall growth swaying in the echoes of its departure. The chamber beyond the tunnel feels different from anywhere you've been so far. A hollow carved into the plateau's edge, its floor dropping away into an unseen depth. The walls curve upward into high arches, and faint streams of bubbles rise from cracks in the rock, drifting lazily toward the dark above. The temperature here is warmer, the water carrying a subtle metallic scent that mingles with the tang of salt. From the far corner of the hollow, movement begins. At first it is nothing but a faint distortion in the water, but soon the massive body comes into view. Its upper surface is mottled with pale and dark patches, blending almost perfectly into the chamber's dim light. The head is small compared to its bulk, the eyes set wide apart, unblinking and steady. It moves with slow precision, sweeping the chamber in broad, deliberate arcs, as though inspecting its boundaries. Every turn sends subtle eddies spiraling across the floor, lifting silt and fragments of shell into the water. The creature makes no sudden movements, no display of power. It simply moves as though there is no force in this place capable of interrupting it. You drift near one of the rock arches, watching it pass close enough for the faint pressure wave to push against you. When it has completed its slow circuit of the hollow, it tilts downward, heading into the dark drop-off at the chamber's center. The last thing you see before it vanishes completely is the slow sweeping motion of its tail, pushing it into depths where the water swallows all light and sound. The hollow falls still, and the faint streams of bubbles resume their lazy rise, carrying with them no sign of what just passed, as though the deep has quietly taken it back. Beyond the hollow, the drop-off leads into a sheer descent, a wall of stone vanishing down into shadow, so thick it feels like the sea has no bottom here. You follow the contour, the rock face rough and irregular, jutting out in shelves, where coral and sponges cling in pale, sprawling clusters. The deeper you move, the more the water changes, cooler again, but also heavier, with that subtle stillness that means fewer disturbances reach this depth. The only sounds are the muted hum of your own movement, and the occasional faint creak of the rock under slow, unseen pressure. A faint pulse in the water signals the approach before any shape appears. It is subtle, more felt than seen, a steady displacement in the current, rhythmic and unbroken. Then the first sign of the giant reveals itself, a pale, narrow head gliding out from the darkness below, followed by a body so long that its tail is still hidden when the head passes close. The skin is patterned in faint, irregular blotches, almost like shadows rippling over its form. As the rest of it emerges, you see how perfectly it hugs the rock wall, fins tucked close, body undulating in a slow, even rhythm. Small fish scatter into crevices as it passes, but the giant does not alter its course. Every so often it presses closer to the wall, as if drawn to inspect certain ledges, and then drifts outward again. The pressure from its movement pushes you gently toward the open water, as if it is guiding everything else away from its chosen path. When it finally angles down toward a shadowed cleft, its body seems to fold into the rock itself, disappearing with such seamlessness that the wall looks unbroken once more. The cliff face continues down until it reaches a wide ledge, a shelf that juts outward like the rim of an underwater amphitheater. The sea floor stretches out from it in a gentle slope, scattered with boulders that seem to have tumbled here from somewhere far above. Between these boulders lie channels filled with darker sediment, and it is from one of these channels that the next movement comes. A ripple distorts the water, followed by a dark, gliding mass. It moves low to the ground, hugging the contour of the channel, each fin stroke slow and deliberate. As it nears, the sheer width of its head becomes clear, broad and flat, with eyes set far apart and slightly forward, giving it the appearance of a patient watcher. Its mouth opens just enough to reveal a hint of the fine, sharp teeth within, then closes again in silence. The mottled skin blends perfectly with the sand and stone beneath, so much so that it vanishes from view entirely when it pauses. It resumes its movement after a long, still moment, gliding past the boulders without touching them. The water it stirs drifts over the ledge, carrying faint traces of disturbed silt into the open blue. You watch until it disappears behind a rise, leaving the channel as empty and quiet as it was before, except now, the silence feels heavier, as if it still lingers somewhere nearby. From the slope beyond the ledge, the water opens into a shallow basin bordered by low ridges of stone. The floor of this basin is uneven, covered in ridged patterns, where the current has carved into the sand over decades or more. It is here, in this hushed space, that another shadow begins to emerge. It appears first as a smudge in the gloom, then sharpens into a long, tapering body that glides across the basin without breaking its slow, even pace. Its dorsal ridge is jagged, rising in irregular peaks that look more like weathered rock than flesh. Each peak catches faint light before vanishing into shadow again. As it crosses the basin, smaller fish drift in behind it, some darting close to its flanks to feed in the disturbed sand, others keeping their distance as though careful not to overstep the bounds of this silent procession. The giant's tail sweeps wide, leaving slow curling eddies that take minutes to fade. It makes no sound, no sudden movement, and yet the basin feels different once it has crossed, as though the water itself has been pressed into a new shape by its passage. The eddies linger like fading echoes, and even after they dissolve, the sense of its presence remains. Beyond the basin, the ridges part into a channel that leads to another drop-off, its mouth framed by towering rock spires. The water here is darker still, and cooler currents swirl upward from the depths below. As you approach the edge, you see faint movement in the shadows, at first only a shifting of darkness against darkness. Then it emerges, a body so wide it nearly fills the mouth of the channel, gliding upward with the slow, steady grace of something utterly without urgency. The skin is marked with pale streaks, long healed scars running from head to tail. Along its sides, broad fins stretch outward, like the wings of a drifting manta, yet they move with less lift and more control, steering the giant with minute adjustments. Its mouth opens briefly as it rises, pulling in a slow flood of water before closing again. The pressure wave from that single motion rolls outward, brushing against you in a heavy, deliberate push. The giant reaches the crest of the channel and tilts, passing between the spires in a single smooth movement. For a moment it is framed there, a living shape caught between pillars of stone, and then it vanishes into the blue beyond. The water still swirls from its passing long after it is gone, the eddies curling through the spires like ghosts reluctant to leave the place where something so immense has just moved. Beyond the spires, the seafloor drops away into a wide, open expanse, where the water feels unnervingly still. It is not the stillness of a calm sea but something deeper, an absence of movement, as though the current itself has been pushed back. The light here is barely more than a suggestion, enough only to reveal the faint outlines of ridges far below. You drift out over this open space, the sensation of exposure sharpening your awareness. There are no walls to shelter behind, no coral growths to break the emptiness, only the slow fall of silt from somewhere high above. It begins with a shift in that silt, a swirling disruption far in the distance. Slowly, the swirl grows, and within it, a form emerges. At first it seems impossibly broad, like a drifting sandbank rising from the deep, but then the edges sharpen, and the sheer scale becomes clear. The giant moves with a deliberation that feels ancient, its bulk blotting out the shapes of the ridges beneath. Its head is immense and flat, the eyes fixed forward in a gaze that never strays from its course. Along its back, faint ridges rise and fall like the spine of a submerged mountain range. As it passes beneath you, the water thickens, pressing against your body in long, heavy pulses. Smaller fish trail far behind, taking advantage of the stirred water, but none dare approach its flanks. The giant's shadow stretches so far that when its head has vanished into the haze ahead, its tail is still emerging from the distance behind. Then, in a single slow sweep, it angles downward, disappearing into the deeper darkness below, and the stillness folds over the expanse once more as if nothing had passed at all. The open plain gradually shifts into a series of low, rolling hills on the seafloor. Each slope is covered in fine sand that shifts slightly with every movement of water. Between the hills, narrow troughs hide pockets of darker silt, places where smaller creatures flit in and out, invisible until they dart against the pale ground. The rhythm of the place is slow and repetitive, almost hypnotic, until it breaks. The first sign is a sudden tightening of the water, a faint pulling as though the entire plain is inhaling. Then a shadow rises from between two distant hills, unfolding into a form both alien and perfectly at home here. Its long body coils in slow, deliberate arcs, each movement stirring up clouds of silt that drift upward in spiraling columns. The skin is patterned in shifting tones of grey and deep blue, the colours sliding along its flanks as it moves. It glides over the hills without pause, each sweep of its tail bridging the valleys with effortless power. At times it rises high enough for its full length to be visible, a living ribbon twisting through the water, and then it sinks low again, hugging the ground. As it passes, the smaller life vanishes entirely, the troughs left empty until the giant's shadow fades into the haze. Only then do they return, moving cautiously, as though the memory of that passage lingers in the sand itself. The rolling terrain gives way to a jagged escarpment, its edge dropping into a chasm so deep, the bottom is lost to darkness. You approach carefully, the cold from below rising like a slow exhale. The walls of the chasm are sheer, in some places, stepped in others, their surfaces broken by narrow ledges and outcrops. Long trails of sediment drift down from above, falling into the black without ever touching the sides. A movement in the depths catches your eye, slow, rhythmic, and impossibly far below. The shadow grows steadily, resolving into the unmistakable shape of a colossal body, ascending from the chasm. It moves with a calm that feels deliberate, each push of its tail slow enough to be counted. The head emerges first, broad and heavy, the eyes glinting faintly in the dim light. The body follows, its flanks lined with ridges that taper toward the base of the tail. It rises until it hovers just below the edge of the escarpment, drifting in place for a long moment. Then, without warning, it tilts and sweeps past, close enough for the pressure to push against you like a slow-moving wave. The current it leaves in its wake is heavy, curling back into the chasm, as if the deep itself is reclaiming it. Beyond the escarpment, the seafloor flattens again, but here it is broken by clusters of massive stone pillars. They rise at odd angles, some leaning together, as though once part of a greater structure. Between them, narrow passages twist and turn, their entrances dark and uninviting. You drift into one such passage, the light fading until the water becomes a soft green-black haze. From the shadows ahead, a presence emerges. It is not sudden, rather the space between the pillars simply seems to fill, as if darkness itself is taking shape. The creature is immense, its body spanning the width of the passage. The skin is smooth and pale, its surface reflecting what little light filters in. It glides forward without altering its pace, passing so close that the gentle push of water brushes your shoulders. The eyes are steady and unblinking, fixed somewhere far beyond. It threads between the pillars with unerring precision, never grazing the stone, its tail sweeping in slow arcs that send shivers through the water. When it reaches the far side, it slips between two leaning columns and is gone, leaving the passage empty once more. The pillars stand unmoved, but the space feels changed, as though the water itself remembers what has just passed through. The stone pillars fade behind you, and the seafloor tilts gently downward once more. The sandy stretch is broken by deep furrows carved into the bedrock. These furrows run parallel for as far as the eye can see, their edges softened by time, yet their scale hints at forces that once moved here with unimaginable power. The water is cooler again, the dimness heavier, as if the weight of the deep is settling over this place. You drift above one of the broader furrows, the silence so complete that even your own movement seems muted. At first there is nothing, just the slow shifting of tiny grains of sand along the edges. But then the stillness changes. A low, steady vibration hums through the water, faint at first, then building with each passing moment. Ahead, the surface of the sand begins to shift, rippling outward in circles. From the haze, the shape emerges, a massive head pushing slowly forward, the rest of the body still hidden beneath the gloom. Its skin is a mottled blend of grey and charcoal, patterns shifting subtly as it moves. The dorsal ridge rises next, each segment uneven, like the jagged stones of an ancient wall. Slowly the length of its body follows, and you realize its tail has not yet appeared even as the head passes beneath you. The giant moves with the inevitability of a slow tide, each sweep of its tail sending a deep pulse through the furrow. Smaller fish scatter in every direction, but the creature ignores them entirely, gliding forward with perfect calm. When it finally clears the far end of the trench, the water closes in behind it, the vibration fading into the stillness once more. Yet the furrow feels different now, not empty, but filled with the memory of its passage, a presence you can almost still feel in the current. The furrows open into a broad, flat plain, where the sand is finer, lighter, and drifts easily with the faintest movement. Here the light is reduced to a cold, silvery haze, the kind that flattens shapes and makes distances difficult to judge. In the far distance, something moves, slow, steady, and perfectly level, as if gliding just above the plane, without disturbing it. As it draws nearer, the details emerge, a wide, flat body with sweeping fins that stretch far to either side. The upper surface is patterned with faint, pale markings that seem to shift with the angle of the light, making its edges blur and vanish into the water around it. The underside is smoother, lighter, reflecting the dim glow in soft gradients. It passes above the sand without touching it, the water beneath its fins pressing downward in subtle waves that leave faint ripples in the sediment. Smaller creatures swim beneath it briefly, feeding on the stirred particles, before darting away when its long tail sweeps behind. The motion is unhurried, as though the giant has been moving this same route for lifetimes, tracing lines in the deep that only it remembers. When it finally glides past, and the plain opens once more, the sand takes minutes to settle, the ripples slowly erasing themselves as the water falls still. You move forward into that stillness, the faint shimmer of the giant already fading into the haze. The plain narrows again, the ground sloping into a broad trough where the water feels heavier, denser, and cooler still. The trough is lined with ridged outcrops, each one draped in soft mats of sponge and coral. Tiny shrimp-like creatures move in the shelter of these ridges, their quick, darting motions vanishing into the shadows when you approach. The first sign of change is a subtle shift in the light, the faint glow from above, dimming as a shadow spreads across the trough. It moves slowly, too large for you to take in at once. The head emerges from the haze first, its shape narrow and long, the jawline strong and marked with pale scars. As it moves forward, the rest of the body follows, thick, muscular, with fins that flare slightly at the edges, before settling back against its flanks. The creature does not swim quickly. Instead, it drifts forward, using slow sweeps of its tail to guide itself through the trough. Its presence presses the water outward, the ridges trembling faintly, as if bowing under its passing. Smaller life vanishes into the coral mats, remaining hidden until the shadow moves on. As the giant clears the end of the trough, the current behind it stirs, curling back into the space it vacated. The faint vibration in the water remains for a while, as though the deep is reluctant to release the imprint of such size. Beyond the trough, the seafloor drops again into a shallow depression ringed by uneven stone. The stones are covered in patches of pale growth, their edges worn smooth by the slow work of the current. The depression is quiet, the only movement the slow rise of bubbles from a crack at its center. You circle the edge cautiously, scanning the haze beyond. At first, nothing moves. Then, as if the water itself is shifting, a shadow forms, immense, deliberate, and unbroken. It glides into view with the patience of something that has no reason to rush, its body filling the depression from one side to the other. The skin is smooth in some places, ridged in others, the variations catching the dim light in shifting patterns. The creature circles the depression once, its head tilting slightly as it passes the rising bubbles. Then, without altering its pace, it angles upward, moving toward the open water beyond the ring of stone. The water swells in its wake, the movement rolling outward until it brushes against you, cool and steady. When it disappears into the gloom, the depression is still again. Only the faint stream of bubbles remains, drifting upward into the darkness, as if nothing of such size could have possibly moved through here at all. The ring of stone behind you fades into the haze, and the seafloor opens into a long, sweeping valley that feels more like a sunken riverbed than an ocean floor. The current is slow here, dragging faint threads of silt along the valley's spine, curling them in lazy spirals, before letting them drift upward into the cold. The walls on either side rise steadily, etched by narrow grooves where countless tides have scraped away at their surface. The further you drift into this valley, the quieter the water feels, the way a room seems to fall silent just before something enters it. At first, the movement ahead could almost be mistaken for the shifting of the water itself. A distortion swells slowly into view, taking on form, depth, and weight, until it is unmistakably alive. The giant appears from the deeper bend of the valley, each motion deliberate, a slow unfolding of scale and shadow. The head is massive, wide across the brow, with a mouth that remains closed but curved downward, in a way that makes it seem solemn. The skin bears long, pale lines, healed scars, crossing in places like faded cartography, drawn upon living flesh. It hugs the valley floor as it moves, the tips of its fins occasionally brushing the sand, stirring faint clouds that swirl briefly before settling again. Following in its wake are small silvery shapes that dart close to feed on what is left behind, each movement cautious, never approaching the giant's head. It does not acknowledge them, nor you nor anything else, its gaze fixed forward, as though bound to a path older than memory. When it draws nearer, the weight of its presence is physical. The water compresses against you, each sweep of its tail pushing a rolling pulse through the valley that makes the silt lift in shifting curtains. You drift slightly higher to avoid the surge, watching the full span of its length pass beneath. Even after the head vanishes into the haze ahead, the body continues, segment after segment, the dorsal ridges breaking the light in uneven patterns, until the tail finally emerges. One last sweep of that tail sends a push of water that rocks you gently before the giant disappears around the bend, leaving the valley shrouded again in its slow, waiting silence. The valley narrows ahead, the walls drawing closer, until their faces rise nearly vertical on either side. The rock is dark here, coated in layers of algae that wave softly in the passing current. In places, the walls are broken by deep cracks, narrow enough to disappear into shadow, yet large enough for something enormous to vanish inside. You move slowly through this corridor, every sound dampened, every shadow lingering just a little too long. A flicker of movement at the edge of sight draws your focus upward. From one of the cracks high in the wall, a shape glides into view, long and pale, its surface mottled in subtle patterns that seem to shift with the light. The head is narrow, the eyes fixed forward, and the mouth a firm line that does not open. It drifts downward toward the center of the corridor, and as it does, more of its body follows from the dark opening, until you realize the crack was hiding only a fraction of its length. It moves low, sweeping close to the sandy floor, the edges of its fins just brushing the ground with each slow undulation. The pressure of its passing pushes a cool wave against the walls, making the algae sway in unison. It passes so near that you can see faint grooves in the skin, shallow ridges that run along its flank like the faint rings of a tree. Behind it, smaller fish dart into the space it vacated, feeding on the disturbed sediment before it settles again. When it reaches the far end of the corridor, the giant turns slightly, slipping between two jutting shelves of rock and vanishing into the blue. The quiet that remains is almost too still, as though the corridor is holding its breath until the giant's absence becomes complete. Beyond the corridor, the valley opens again, into a wide basin ringed by sloping rock faces. The floor of the basin is uneven, marked by shallow depressions and long scars that look as though something enormous has swept across it, again and again, over centuries. The water feels cooler here, the faint current wrapping around you in slow spirals before slipping upward into the open space above. The first sign of movement is subtle, a shadow gliding along one of the sloping walls, almost blending into the stone. It grows clearer as it descends toward the basin floor, the dark upper surface fading into a pale underside as it banks into a slow turn. The body is immense, its wings sweeping out in long, graceful arcs that seem to push against the water without effort. The mouth opens wide as it drifts across a cloud of drifting life, drawing it in before closing again, in the same unbroken motion. It circles the basin slowly, the tip of one wing brushing so close to the floor that it sends ripples of sand outward in delicate spiraling patterns. Following in its slipstream are clusters of smaller fish, weaving in and out of the disturbed sand to feed. The giant does not alter its path for them. Its slow rotation seems as much about owning the space as it is about feeding. After several slow revolutions, It tilts upward and begins to rise toward the basin's rim. The water swirls behind it, the patterns on the floor shifting slowly as the disturbed sand settles once more. By the time it disappears over the edge, the basin feels emptier, but also charged, as though the echo of its motion still hums in the water. Past the basin's edge, the ground tilts downward into a series of terraces, each one dropping a few meters before leveling out briefly. You descend slowly, moving from one to the next, noting how the rock here is smoother, as if polished by countless tides. At the base of the terraces lies a broad, flat plain, its surface marked by the faint lines of current-scoured sand. From the haze at the far side, a shadow emerges, not quickly, but in the steady, certain way that suggests complete ownership of this space. The head appears first, blunt and massive, the mouth closed, but set in a shape that suggests quiet strength. The eyes are dark, reflecting nothing, giving away nothing. The body follows in deliberate segments, first the broad shoulders, then the thick, ridged dorsal surface, each ridge spaced irregularly, the scars between them pale against the darker skin. It crosses the plain without deviation, the sweep of its tail sending rolling waves outward that take long moments to fade. The current it creates pushes you gently sideways, carrying with it faint traces of disturbed silt. Along its flanks, a handful of small, fast-moving creatures cling tightly, riding the slow, constant force of its movement. They seem unbothered by your presence, focused entirely on keeping their place along the giant's sides. When it reaches the far end of the plain, the giant tilts slightly, descending into a narrow cleft that seems too small for its size. Yet it slips into the gap with perfect ease, vanishing into shadow as though it has done so countless times before. The water settles slowly, the ripples fading into the sand, until the plain looks untouched, hiding the fact that something so immense passed here only moments ago. Beyond the narrow cleft, the seafloor opens into a wide, dim plain, where the water feels cooler and heavier, the currents moving in deep, slow surges, rather than the lighter flows of shallower ground. The plain is marked by long, meandering ridges of sand and stone, their shapes softened over centuries by the constant touch of the ocean. Between these ridges lie shallow troughs, where fine silt has gathered, clouding upward in lazy spirals whenever something passes too near. It is quiet here, so quiet that the faint hum of your own movement seems almost too loud, an intrusion into a place where even sound has grown patient. The first hint of life is a subtle flicker in the haze far ahead, too brief to fix your gaze upon before it vanishes again. Then, from the faint darkness, a vast head emerges, pale along the underside, dark and mottled above. The jawline is long and heavy, curving into a broad sweep that narrows toward the snout. Behind it, the neck tapers into the enormous breadth of its shoulders, and then the rest of the body unfurls into the water. Each slow beat of its tail pushes a rolling wave through the plain, stirring the silt from the troughs in billowing clouds. It moves without hurry, its long pectoral fins outstretched in a gentle arc, adjusting minutely with the current. Along its flanks are faint, irregular scars, some shallow, others deep enough to form grooves that catch the dim light. Smaller fish dart close to its sides, riding the calmer water that flows just behind its broad head, and then scatter as the giant dips slightly toward the sand. Its mouth opens, drawing in a slow surge of water, then closes with no visible effort. The giant continues on its path, the sheer length of its form taking long moments to pass completely. Even after the tail has vanished into the haze, the ripples from its passing move steadily outward, disturbing the sand along the ridges, and shifting the fine grains in tiny avalanches. You hover in the slow rhythm it leaves behind, watching the plain settle again into its deep, waiting silence. The ridges of sand gradually give way to a low, rolling rise of bare rock, its surface crisscrossed with pale lines where barnacles and corals once clung. The rise is not high, but its gentle slope allows you to see farther than before, out into the dim expanse beyond. The light here is faint, a bluish-grey haze that flattens the shapes of distant features until they appear and vanish with each shift in the water. From that haze, a vast shadow emerges. It moves in slow, level strokes, each beat of its tail sending a deep, even pulse through the water. The head is broad, the eyes set wide apart and slightly forward, giving it a constant look of calm focus. Its body is darker along the top, the patterns along its skin fading gradually toward the lighter underside. The dorsal ridge is uneven, broken in places by long-healed scars that speak of encounters with forces equal to its own size. It passes over the rock rise without altering its path, the sweep of its fins brushing faint eddies into the water below. A group of small, fast fish trails close behind, darting in to feed on whatever particles the giant disturbs. The creature does not acknowledge them. It moves as though nothing in this place could be important enough to alter its steady course. As it drifts farther into the open, the light catches faintly on its tail, illuminating the slow flex of its powerful muscles. Then it tilts slightly, adjusting its heading, and the massive body melts back into the haze. The pulses in the water fade gradually, until only the bare rock beneath you remains, quiet and still as before. Beyond the rise, the seafloor drops again into a shallow depression, its floor patterned with rippling lines of sand that radiate outward, like the marks left by a receding tide. At the far end, large boulders cluster together, their rounded forms coated in pale growth that sways faintly in the sluggish current. The water feels colder here, and heavier, as though it collects in this basin before spilling out into the depths beyond. A faint movement stirs the edge of the basin. At first it is no more than a shift in shadow, a slow alteration of shape against the rocks. Then the head emerges, broad and low, the mouth slightly open to reveal a hint of pale, conical teeth. The body follows in a slow, deliberate glide, thick through the middle, tapering toward a long tail that sweeps in gentle, commanding arcs. It moves toward the center of the basin, the water pushing outward in soft waves from each motion. The sand at the bottom stirs in slow spirals, drifting upward to hang in the light before settling again. Smaller fish scatter into the crevices between boulders, their quick movements vanishing into the pale growth. The giant makes no move to chase them. Its path remains steady, its gaze fixed on some distant point beyond the basin. When it reaches the far edge, the creature dips slightly, disappearing into a narrow gap between two large stones. The current in its wake brushes over you, carrying with it the faint scent of disturbed silt, and the quiet reminder that it has passed this way countless times before. Past the basin, the seafloor evens out into a broad, empty stretch of sand, broken only by the occasional low mound. The light here is soft and uncertain, and the water feels unusually still, as though the current has been blocked by something far ahead. You move forward slowly, the quiet amplifying the faintest sounds, the brush of silt shifting, the whisper of your own movement. Then the stillness bends. A shadow forms at the far edge of the haze, too large to fully take in all at once. The head appears first, massive and angular, the eyes fixed forward and unblinking. The body follows, each slow stroke of its tail sending a low wave through the water that rolls across the sand before you. Its skin is smooth in places, ridged in others, the irregular textures catching the light in shifting patterns. As it passes, you feel the water compress around you, the quiet replaced by the low hum of its motion. The mounds on the seafloor tremble faintly, sending thin veils of sand drifting upward. It does not pause, does not turn, it simply continues on, disappearing into the haze, as if the plain belongs to it alone. The stillness returns in its wake, but it is no longer the same. Now it feels like something deliberate, as though the deep itself has chosen to rest again until the next great shadow arrives. The water ahead darkens, not with sudden shadow, but with the slow deepening of color, as though layers of blue are being folded over one another. The seafloor beneath you narrows into a broad ridge, its sides sloping away into depths you cannot see. Along the crest, scattered coral heads and sponges cling stubbornly, their forms softened by years of current and sand. The ridge hums faintly, with movement, Not sound exactly, but a sensation carried through the water, a reminder that something vast is shifting out there, in the dim. A pulse moves through the current, then another, slow and deliberate. At first you think it might be the rhythm of the tide, but the spacing is wrong, too steady, too measured. The source becomes visible in fragments, a pale sweep of fin catching the light, a glint from an eye set deep beneath a bony ridge. Then the full form resolves, longer than anything you've seen in hours, each movement a slow, calculated motion that seems less like swimming and more like sliding the ocean aside. Its head passes close to the ridge, the eye swiveling slightly, not to look at you, but to mark the shape of the ground. It moves on without pause, the broad body casting a shadow that sweeps over you like the passing of a cloud. In its wake, schools of smaller fish emerge from hiding, darting through the disturbed water, to pick at whatever has been lifted from the coral. The giant's tail sweeps once, twice, and it is gone into the deepening blue. The water settles, but the ridge now feels different, a high path across an emptiness that holds more than it reveals. You keep moving, drawn toward the place where the giant vanished, knowing the ridge will soon give way to another change in the sea floor. The ridge tapers, narrowing until it becomes a series of connected mounds, barely wide enough to hold the growths that cling to them. The water is cooler here, the current carrying with it faint particles that shimmer when they catch what little light filters down. Beyond the mounds lies a drop-off, not a sheer wall, but a long, sloping descent into deeper shadow. You pause at its edge, scanning the haze below for any hint of movement. It begins with a glimmer, a faint reflection far beneath you. Then the reflection moves, rising slowly, its source growing larger with each second. The shape that emerges is unlike the sleek giants you've seen before. Its body is thicker, more heavily built, with ridged plates along its back that break the water in jagged lines. Its fins are broad, edged in a way that catches light in sharp glints. The head is massive, the jaws deep and square, opening just enough to show rows of teeth shaped for holding, not slicing. It rises along the slope, the pressure of its movement pushing against you even at this distance. As it passes a cluster of boulders, several smaller creatures scatter from the cracks, only to be overtaken by the giant's wake. It doesn't chase them. Its pace is unchanging, purposeful, as if following some ancient route that no other life dares to claim. When it reaches the crest of the slope, it levels out, passing so near that you can see the texture of its skin, a rough, pitted surface that bears the marks of battles older than the growths on the rocks. Then it turns, disappearing back into the drop-off with a slow final sweep of its tail, leaving only the drifting haze to mark where it has been. The slope gives way to a flat, open plain, its surface broken by long cracks, where the ground has shifted. These fissures are deep, some wide enough to swallow entire schools of fish, and they vanish into darkness that swallows the light entirely. You drift above one, feeling the cold rise from its depths. A flicker of motion draws your gaze to the far side of the plain. A large shape glides into view, its body lined with faint patterns that shift in the changing light. It moves slowly across the fissured ground, passing over cracks, without hesitation, its long tail swaying in perfect rhythm with its fins. Then another shape follows it, smaller, but similar in form. The two travel together, their paths aligned, their movements unhurried but impossibly sure. The larger of the two dips slightly, gliding along the edge of a fissure. The smaller one follows, mirroring its every move. When they cross over a particularly wide gap, their tails sweep downward in unison, creating a rolling surge that carries them across without effort. They continue toward the far edge of the plain, where the cracks narrow and the ground becomes more solid. As they vanish into the haze, you are left with the impression that the smaller one was learning, following not out of necessity, but out of habit. An unspoken bond carried forward through countless journeys across this same fractured expanse. Past the fissured plain, the terrain changes again. Large, irregular columns of stone rise from the seafloor, some leaning at sharp angles, others standing alone like forgotten markers. The water is still here, the columns blocking much of the current, and fine particles hang suspended in the light, like drifting dust. You move carefully between the columns, the silence amplifying every small sound, the faint scrape of sand against stone, the distant pop of something breaking far away. Then, from behind one of the tallest columns, a vast head emerges. Its skin is mottled with shadows, the patterns shifting as it turns in the light. The body follows, massive and coiled with slow power, the long tail wrapping briefly around one column before unwinding again. It moves in a slow spiral, passing between the stone pillars, with the ease of something that has done so for lifetimes. At one point, it glides so near that you can see its gill slits flare and close, the slow pull of water through them almost hypnotic. It does not look at you, but its presence fills the space entirely, as if the columns themselves bend to make way for it. When it finally slips past the last pillar, the stillness returns, but it feels heavier, as though the creature's absence is a space that will not be filled again soon. You pause, letting the silence settle before moving on, deeper into whatever lies beyond this sheltered place. Beyond the last of the stone pillars, the water opens into a vast amphitheater-shaped hollow in the seafloor, its edges rising in gentle curves before plunging into deeper darkness. The basin floor is littered with scattered shells and fragments of bone, some bleached pale, others darkened by years of sediment. The silt here is fine and loose, shifting into curling plumes at the slightest disturbance, and the airless weight of the place presses down like an unseen tide. The first movement you notice is not from above but from the basin floor itself, a tremor, subtle yet steady, sending faint ripples through the silt. A shadow takes form in the center, indistinct at first, as though the water resists revealing it. Then it rises, the shape resolving into the massive head and broad shoulders of something that dwarfs the largest creatures you've yet seen. Its body is thick and muscular, the ridges along its back catching stray light like the scales of an armored fortress. Long pectoral fins extend outward, moving slowly as it pushes its bulk into the open water. The jawline is enormous, its lower edge trailing faintly luminescent threads that pulse with a cold glow. Each slow beat of its tail sends a rolling current outward, pushing the loose silt into billowing waves that drift toward the basin's edges. Smaller fish scatter in every direction, vanishing into the crevices along the rising walls. The creature doesn't pursue, it simply glides in a slow, deliberate circuit around the basin, as though claiming it once again after some long absence. Every pass brings it closer to your position, until you can make out the fine scratches across its snout, the places where its skin is puckered and healed from ancient battles. Then, without warning, it dips and descends, returning to the exact place it had emerged from. The silt swallows it completely, leaving the basin as it was before, quiet, still, and somehow heavier for what it just revealed. Past the amphitheater, the seafloor rises into a jagged ridge of broken stone, the kind that looks as though it was forced upward from deep below. The ridge is fractured, with narrow gaps that run like channels through the rock, each one filled with darker water that seems reluctant to mingle with the lighter currents above. A faint shimmer flickers deep within one of these channels, then vanishes. You drift closer, peering into the shadows, and catch sight of a large, slow-turning eye, set deep in a massive head. The rest of the body emerges in sections. A shoulder, a fin, the long rolling curve of its spine. This giant is built for power, its body broader than most, its tail shaped like a great paddle that can shift the entire channel's flow with a single beat. It moves along the narrow passage without effort, its massive frame fitting perfectly between the ridges, as though it was made to patrol them. As it passes, the rough stone scrapes faintly against its flanks, releasing tiny bursts of trapped bubbles that rise toward the surface. In its wake, the water churns in muted spirals, carrying with it the scent of stone and the faint metallic tang of the deep. The creature never alters its path, never turns to acknowledge your presence. It moves forward with unwavering precision until it reaches the far end of the ridge, where it vanishes into a yawning split in the seafloor, leaving only the slow swirl of disturbed current behind. Beyond the ridge, the terrain smooths into an open expanse of sand that stretches farther than sight allows. Here the water feels oddly still, The kind of stillness that makes the smallest disturbance seem amplified. The light is dim, almost the color of ash, and shadows move in strange, slow shapes across the sand. At first you think it is the movement of the current playing tricks on your vision, but then the shadows take on more defined shapes. Long, tapering bodies with sweeping tails and powerful, deliberate fin strokes. They move in silence, their massive forms casting a pall across the plain as they pass overhead. One drifts lower, close enough that its shadow swallows you entirely. The underside of its body is pale, lined with subtle grooves that trace toward the tail. Its head turns slightly, revealing a dark eye that reflects the faint light like a shard of polished stone. Then it returns to its path, neither speeding up nor slowing down, as though it had simply registered your existence and dismissed it in the same moment. More follow, each keeping its distance from the others, but all moving in the same direction towards some unseen destination beyond the plain. The sight of so many massive shapes together stirs an ancient unease, the knowledge that you are among creatures that move according to rhythms far older than anything human. At the far edge of the sand plain, a jagged escarpment rises abruptly, its sheer face covered in pale growths that sway slowly in the current. The wall is pitted with wide cavities, some shallow, others disappearing into total darkness. You approach one of the deeper openings, its mouth framed by rough stone that looks worn by centuries of tidal movement. A sudden shift in the water warns you before the shape emerges. A massive head, its skin patterned with dark, uneven stripes. The mouth opens slightly, revealing teeth shaped like long, narrow stakes, then closes again as the giant turns its body sideways to clear the opening. The rest follows, a length of muscle and power that seems to take far too long to pass. It glides downward along the face of the escarpment, the broad sweep of its tail leaving faint spirals in the current. Every movement is slow but heavy with strength, each fin stroke pushing it farther along the wall's base. At one point, it turns its head toward you, the dark eye holding your gaze for a moment longer than comfort allows. Then it moves on, vanishing into another cavity farther along, as if continuing a route it has known for a lifetime. You hover in the water, the silence of the place folding in again around you, knowing that beyond every wall, every hollow, something vast and ancient could be waiting. The water narrows into a deep channel, flanked by towering cliffs of basalt, their surfaces carved into long vertical ridges by an ancient and relentless force. Each groove runs unbroken from the unreachable heights above to the abyssal dark far below, as if the ocean itself had dragged claws down the rock in some forgotten age. Between these sheer walls, the space feels compressed, the airless weight of the depths pressing inward, until even your own heartbeat seems too loud. The light here has diminished to a muted grey, not the clear shimmer of shallow waters, but the faded echo of illumination, like a memory too long submerged. At first the current feels steady, almost manageable, but within its flow there is something else. A low vibration, so faint it's less felt than sensed. It thrums in long intervals, not random but patterned, each pulse separated by enough stillness to make you doubt whether you imagined it at all. You move forward, your presence as small as possible, each motion careful, controlled. The basalt cliffs loom beside you like cathedral walls, every ridge catching fragments of dim light, every shadow hiding depths you can't measure. The vibration grows stronger, enough that now you feel it in your bones. The intervals shorten slightly, and with each pulse the water seems to shift minutely, as if the very pressure of the sea is flexing and relaxing. Then ahead, something moves, not sharply, but with the inevitability of a continent drifting. A shadow coalesces at the far bend of the channel, vague at first, then resolving with the patience of the deep into a vast and singular shape. It comes into view like a revelation. From one cliff wall to the other, it fills the passage, leaving only the smallest ribbons of space between its body and the rock. Its silhouette is a slow tapestry of movement, immense pectoral fins sweeping in great arcs, a tail whose motion bends the current itself. The plates along its back rise in ridged tiers, each catching stray traces of light like weathered armor. The head is broad, the mouth closed but immense, the snout etched with long pale scars, some deep enough to cast their own shadows. As it draws closer, the scale becomes overwhelming. The cliff faces, once imposing, now seem small beside it. Your entire body registers its presence in ways beyond sight, in the pressure wave that precedes it, in the faint metallic taste it leaves in the water, in the soundless command it exerts simply by existing. It glides past with a composure that speaks of centuries spent unchallenged. Its scars tell stories of battles with others of its kind, or with creatures even larger, though such a possibility seems impossible, until you remember that here, in this place, size has no upper limit. You resist the instinct to move as its flank passes by, the rough texture of its skin visible in shifting detail, mottled and thick like stone smoothed by time, yet still marked by violence. One eye, deep and dark as the space between stars, turns briefly in your direction. There is no fear in it, no curiosity, only the recognition that you are part of the scenery, nothing more. And then it moves on, its tail sweeping past with such force that the current grabs hold of you, turning your body in its wake. The channel seems emptier for its absence, but the vibration remains, fainter now but still there, echoing in the stone as though the cliffs themselves have taken up the memory of its passing. The stillness that follows is deceptive. You keep moving forward, senses sharpened, knowing instinctively that where there is one giant, there may be others. Further along the channel, you find evidence of something else. The basalt ridges show fresh gouges, not like the long weathered lines above, but sharper, newer, the work of teeth or claws powerful enough to score solid stone. Some are as wide as your hand, others deep enough to fit your entire arm into. In certain places, the marks overlap, creating jagged patterns that speak of violent encounters hidden from human sight. The current changes again, subtly, this time flowing toward you rather than with you. It carries with it the scent of disturbed silt, and something faintly organic, a sign that another presence moves somewhere ahead. The vibration shifts in response, and though you cannot yet see the source, you feel it. Another shape, another life, sliding silently through the water beyond your reach. You pause near a narrow recess in the cliff wall, its entrance just large enough to conceal you if needed. The darkness inside seems complete, but as you let your eyes adjust, you catch faint reflections deep within, small flashes, like the quick turn of scales catching what little light filters down. They vanish almost as quickly, leaving only black water. When you emerge again into the channel's main flow, the distant shape is gone, the vibration fading into the background hum of the ocean. The basalt cliffs continue onward, and you follow, each slow movement carrying you deeper into a place that feels less like a corridor, and more like a threshold into something vast, something older than the cliffs themselves. The channel bends ahead, the water darkening further, and with it comes the understanding that here, in these silent depths, encounters are never final. The giants may pass and vanish, but their presence lingers, woven into the current, into the stone, into the very stillness that surrounds you now. And as you drift into that stillness, the faint vibration begins again, slower this time, but no less certain, a reminder that in this place, nothing truly disappears. The bend ahead reveals a subtle widening of the channel, though the basalt cliffs still tower on either side, like colossal, unbroken fortresses. The water here moves differently, slower at the edges, but swirling in the center, as though some unseen hand is stirring the depths from far below. The muted grey light has thinned to an almost colorless gloom, forcing you to rely less on sight, and more on the rhythm of the water, the shifts in current, the sounds that carry strangely far in this heavy medium. You drift into the widening with caution, every movement deliberate. The floor beneath you falls away sharply into blackness, its edge lined with strange formations, not coral, not rock, but curved spines rising in half-buried arcs from the sediment. At first they seem like the remains of some long-dead leviathan, each rib-like arch the size of a small boat. But as you hover near them, you notice subtle trails of sediment drifting upward from their base, as if disturbed from below. They are not remnants. They are part of something alive, something waiting far beneath the sediment, breathing in slow tectonic rhythms. A low, resonant hum fills the water, not the steady vibration from before, but something deeper, almost like a song stretched so far that its notes dissolve into feeling rather than sound. It rolls through your chest and along your spine, unsettling in its familiarity, as though your body remembers such calls from some distant ancestral memory. The arches shift slightly, each movement so gradual, it's almost imperceptible, but enough to send tiny whirlpools spiraling upward. Your gaze lifts to the water ahead, where the gloom breaks briefly into a pale clearing, a suspended cloud of microscopic life, catching some stray reflection from the cliffs above. The swarm moves as one, pulsing outward in waves, and within it, you sense shapes passing silently. They are large but indistinct, their outlines blurred by the living mist. Every so often, one drifts close enough that you catch the glint of a massive eye, the sweep of a fin, before it fades again into the cloud. You press onward, the spines behind you fading into the dark. The current changes again, this time drawing downward, coaxing you toward the abyssal floor. There at the base of the widened chamber, you find a scar in the earth, a deep, narrow trench stretching beyond sight in either direction. Its edges are jagged, as if torn rather than formed by geological time. The water inside is colder, denser, and it carries a slow-moving darkness that feels older than the cliffs themselves. From that trench, movement comes, a long, deliberate rise of something vast. It breaches the edge without hurry, revealing the serrated crest of a dorsal fin longer than your entire body. Then another fin, larger, moving in counterbalance, followed by a tail whose movement displaces the water in great silent pulses. The body between them is immense, its scales overlapping like plates of hammered metal, each glistening with a sheen that seems almost oily. The creature moves with quiet certainty, its path angling toward the swarm above. As it ascends, smaller shadows scatter, but not all escape. You watch as one shape, large enough on its own to dwarf any modern predator, is overtaken in a single unhurried strike. There is no flurry of violence, only a smooth closing of massive jaws and a sudden absence where life had been. The swarm ripples outward, and the predator drifts back toward the trench, the captured prey vanishing into the darkness with it. You hover, the urge to follow tempered by the knowledge that even from here, you feel the cold emanating from that abyss. It is not just the chill of deep water, it is the absence of the sun's touch, the kind of cold that has never known warmth. Something shifts behind you. You turn in time to see another presence entering the widening, smaller than the trench predator, but still colossal by any other measure. Its body is more streamlined, built for sudden acceleration, and its movement cuts the water with a speed that belies its size. It arcs upward, vanishing into the pale clearing, and for a moment the silence holds. Then a shockwave of displaced current rolls down, followed by a scattering of silvery fragments, scales, still catching the last threads of light as they spiral toward the depths. The streamlined hunter descends again, passing within meters of you. Its eyes, set forward, flick briefly in your direction, holding a glint that feels less indifferent than the others, a glint that marks you as something noticed, if not yet considered. It continues past, vanishing into the jagged trench. The widening grows still once more, but it is not an emptiness. The hum from the buried spines still thrums faintly behind you. The pale swarm shifts above, and from the trench, the faintest echo of movement whispers through the water. You know this place will not stay quiet for long. The channel beyond narrows again, the cliffs leaning inward, their ridges growing sharper, more irregular. It feels as though you are being guided, or funneled, towards something ahead. And though you cannot see it yet, the pressure in the water tells you the truth. The giants of this place are not scattered across endless reaches, they are gathered, and you are heading directly toward where they converge. The narrowing passage ahead feels different from the one you entered earlier. Here the basalt cliffs are not smooth, carved into neat vertical ridges, but jagged and twisted, as though some ancient upheaval split them violently apart and left them frozen in that state. Their faces jut inward in irregular angles, sometimes forcing you dangerously close to the rock, as the current pushes and pulls with hidden turbulence. Even in the dimness, you can see the scars on these walls, not the work of time alone, but of collisions, scrapes, and perhaps desperate attempts by enormous bodies to force their way through. The water grows heavier, not in temperature, but in pressure, as though you are entering a pocket of the ocean, where the very density of the world increases. The soundscape shifts too. The distant hums and low vibrations you've been following are joined now by deep, hollow knocks that echo off the stone. They come irregularly, some sharp and abrupt, others long and resonant, and with each, the water seems to quiver ever so slightly. These are not random noises, they are signals. You push forward, the walls pressing closer, until they feel like the sides of a living throat, swallowing you deeper. Then, without warning, the channel drops sharply, plunging into a chasm so sudden, it feels like the floor has been ripped away. The descent is steep, the basalt giving way to darker rock streaked with minerals that glint like distant stars when your light catches them. The current tugs you downward, and far below, faint glows begin to emerge, not sunlight, but bioluminescence, scattered like constellations in the black. As you approach, the shapes behind the lights come into focus. Some belong to slow-moving organisms, clinging to the cliff walls, immense anemone-like structures, with tendrils, as long as tree trunks, each filament tipped with a faint blue glow. Others drift freely, jelly-like forms the size of houses, pulsing with soft internal light, as they move lazily through the chasm. But farther still, there are larger silhouettes, solid, deliberate, and moving with a purpose that has nothing to do with feeding on drifting plankton. The first passes below you, and its sheer scale makes the basalt cliffs feel suddenly insignificant. It moves with ponderous authority, its massive head sweeping from side to side, trailing a tail that arcs like a living scythe. The faint light from the drifting jellies reflects off its skin, revealing patterns like ancient carvings, symmetrical, deliberate, and impossibly intricate, for something formed by nature. It is not alone. Another shape emerges from the opposite wall of the chasm, and though smaller, it moves faster, circling the first in a wide loop. Their paths intersect briefly, and when they do, the deep knocks return, now clearly coming from the two of them. The sound reverberates through the rock, carrying for what feels like miles. It is a conversation you cannot understand, but it is not idle. This is communication meant for others of their kind, and perhaps for more than just these two. The chasm widens suddenly into a vast hollow chamber, the roof lost in darkness above, the floor invisible below. It is here that the converging sounds finally make sense. Shapes emerge from every side, some drifting down from above, others rising from the abyss beneath you. The water is thick with movement, slow arcs of massive tails, the lazy sweep of fins, the sudden dart of smaller predators, weaving between the giants. Each is unique in form, yet all share one thing, an immensity that dwarfs the largest creature you've ever seen in modern seas. Some have armored backs, their plates ridged and layered like overlapping shields. Others are smooth and sleek, built for bursts of speed, their long jaws lined with teeth the length of your forearm. A few carry strange luminous growths trailing from their heads or flanks, swaying with each motion like living lanterns. The knocks echo constantly now, coming from every direction, overlapping into a deep, resonant chorus that you feel in the marrow of your bones. You hold your position, scarcely daring to move. The chamber feels like a gathering place, a meeting ground where these giants exchange signals before dispersing again into the vastness. For a brief moment, you wonder if this is migration, mating, or something else entirely, a ritual older than the continents above. But then the movement changes. The chorus of knocks shifts rhythm, becoming faster, more urgent. The giants' paths tighten, their movements more coordinated. From the abyssal floor far below, a darkness rises, not just the absence of light, but a form so immense it absorbs the glow from everything around it. At first it seems like the shadow of the chamber itself is lifting, but then the edges move, slow and deliberate, until they take shape. The creature's head alone is the size of a small hill, its body tapering into an unseen length that disappears back into the chasm floor. Its skin is rough and scarred, patterned with deep trenches and ridges that suggest centuries of survival in a place where nothing is small. The other giants give way, not fleeing but circling, their knocks now forming a strange syncopation around the rising behemoth. It turns its head slightly, one massive eye reflecting the faint light, and for a heartbeat you feel as though it has looked directly at you. There is no malice in it, but there is recognition, the way a mountain might regard a grain of sand. The largest of the circling creatures moves in closer, brushing its armored flank along the newcomer's side. The contact sends a shudder through the water, and the knocks cease entirely. For a long, heavy moment, there is only silence, broken only by the deep, measured motion of the largest creature's breathing. Then, without warning, it descends again, sliding back into the abyss below, its form fading into nothing. The chorus resumes softer now, and one by one the giants begin to disperse. Some vanish into the upper darkness, others into the cracks of the chasm walls. The armored one drifts past you, so close you could reach out and touch the thick, scarred skin. It does not acknowledge you, or perhaps it does, in its own way, but it does not alter its path. When the chamber is almost empty, the knocks fade into the distance, leaving you once again alone in the heavy stillness. The current shifts subtly, guiding you toward another exit carved between jagged cliffs. You follow it, the memory of that immense gathering imprinted in every part of you, a reminder that there are places in the ocean where the age of giants never truly ended. The exit from the great hollow chamber narrows quickly, forcing you through a canyon so tight that the walls feel close enough to scrape your shoulders. The rock here is darker than basalt, almost metallic in its sheen, and as your light sweeps across it, you see strange grooves etched into the surface, parallel cuts running for meters at a time before vanishing into the darkness. They are too regular to be the work of water alone, and they are far too large to have been made by anything you know in modern seas. The current here is stronger, funneling you onward, carrying with it a deep, faint hum that seems to come from ahead. The sound is not like the knocks of the previous gathering, but a continuous resonance, as though the very rock is vibrating. The further you go, the stronger it becomes, until it is not just a sound but a pressure that pushes faintly against your chest and skull. The canyon floor begins to drop again, revealing a basin so vast it feels like you've stumbled into the bottom of a drowned world. There is no roof here, no enclosing walls, only a perimeter of sheer cliffs that fade into shadow above. The water is clearer than before, allowing you to see far across the expanse. The sea floor is littered with massive, uneven mounds, each one the size of a house, some smooth and rounded, others sharp-edged and broken. At first you think they might be rock formations, but then one of them moves. It is slow, almost imperceptible at first, a subtle ripple across the mound's surface, followed by the gradual lifting of an enormous fin. Sand and debris cascade off it in a slow waterfall, as the rest of the creature shifts beneath, the movement sending up plumes of silt that drift lazily in the current. As your eyes adjust, you realize that not just one, but several of these mounds are alive. They have been lying here, motionless, their bodies camouflaged against the sea floor, waiting. The largest of them stirs fully now, rising on broad paddle-like limbs that churn the sand in great spirals. Its head emerges from the debris, long and narrow, with a jawline serrated like the edge of an ancient blade. The mouth opens slightly, as if tasting the current, revealing rows of teeth shaped less for slicing and more for gripping, the kind that would hold a struggling prey tight as it was dragged beneath the waves. All around, other giants begin to rouse. Some roll onto their sides before righting themselves. Others simply lift their heads and tails, the motion slow but undeniably powerful. The hum you heard earlier deepens as they rise, a resonant undertone that seems to connect them, as though their movements are part of some synchronized act. The sand swirls upward in golden clouds, catching the faint light from above, and giving the entire basin an otherworldly glow. Then, without any clear signal, the gathering begins to move. They do not rush or surge. Instead, they spread out in a wide, deliberate arc, each creature maintaining a careful distance from the others. Their heads sway gently from side to side, scanning, measuring. You follow the line of their gaze, and see movement far in the distance, a darker patch against the already dark water, shifting and breaking apart into multiple shapes. The shapes grow larger as they approach, resolving into a school of massive, slow-moving creatures, unlike the predators circling you now. These newcomers have wide, flat bodies that undulate as they swim, each wing-like fin stroke pushing them forward in graceful sweeps. They are filter feeders, vast but unarmed, their mouths open to strain the water for whatever drifts in the depths. The predators tighten their formation, the hum deepening again until it thrums in your bones. The first strike is not a chase but an ambush. One predator drops lower, disappearing into the sand again, while another rises slightly to draw the filter feeder's attention. When the prey adjusts its course to avoid the upper threat, the hidden one surges upward in a sudden explosive burst. The speed is shocking for something so massive. Sand fountains into the water, as the predator's jaws clamp around the softer underside of the prey. The rest of the predators close in, but not recklessly. They move in coordinated bursts, some blocking escape routes, others striking from the flanks. The water fills with turbulence as the prey struggles, its great fins thrashing and sending shockwaves through the basin. The hum becomes almost deafening now, a vibration that feels as though it's coming from every direction at once. The attack is brutal but efficient. Within minutes the prey is subdued, and the predators begin to feed. They do not fight each other for position. Instead, they seem to take turns, one pulling back as another moves in, the hum softening slightly during the exchange. It is a ritual as much as a hunt, and its rhythm is as old as the sea itself. From your vantage point at the basin's edge, you can see the sheer scale of it all. Creatures larger than any modern whale, moving with precision and unity, their feeding grounds hidden in this abyss where no light from the surface ever reaches. The cliffs that encircle the basin feel impossibly tall, the exit routes narrow and few, as though the place was designed to keep the world out and the giants in. When the feeding is done, the predators drift apart again, their movements slowing. Some settle back onto the sea floor, vanishing once more beneath a covering of sand. Others head toward the canyon exits, their massive bodies fading into the blackness. The hum fades with them, replaced by the soft hiss of the current, as it swirls through the now empty basin. You remain still for a long time, the image of that hunt etched into your mind, not for its violence, but for its sheer inevitability. In this place, in this forgotten era beneath the waves, the cycle of predator and prey plays out on a scale so vast it defies any comparison to the surface world. Here survival is not just a matter of strength or speed, but of patience, cooperation, and a kind of ancient understanding that binds these creatures together. Slowly you turn toward one of the narrow exits, letting the current carry you onward. The basin fades behind you, its sands settling once again, ready to hide its inhabitants until the next hunt. Ahead lies more darkness, more unknown shapes, and the promise that somewhere in the depths, other giants are waiting. The canyon beyond the basin twists like a coiled serpent, forcing you into a slow, cautious path through its turns. The rock here is pitted and hollowed, its surface is riddled with cavities that range from the size of your hand to the size of small rooms. At first they seem empty, dark little pockets in the cliff face. But as you pass, you catch flickers of movement deep within, glimmers of bioluminescence. The pale curve of a fin, the quick dart of something retreating into the shadows. The walls themselves seem alive, not with the steady motion of a reef, but with the restless shifting of creatures that prefer to remain unseen. The current is gentle at first, almost lazy, but it carries a strange undertone, a subtle oscillation that makes it feel like the water itself is breathing. Every few moments the pull changes direction slightly, as though responding to some hidden rhythm. You let it guide you forward, the canyon narrowing until it opens suddenly into a long corridor flanked by vertical cliffs that rise so high they disappear into darkness. The sea floor here is littered with debris, massive fragments of bone, some bleached white by age, others still sheathed in the leathery remains of flesh. Some bones are snapped clean through, their interiors hollowed out, while others are scarred by deep gouges that speak of powerful jaws and desperate struggles. The sheer size of them is staggering. A single rib could serve as the keel of a ship, and a skull lying half buried in silt could easily hold an entire modern shark within its hollow. You drift between these relics of violence, the water around you eerily still, as if even the current hesitates to disturb this place. Then, ahead, the corridor widens again into an amphitheater-shaped depression in the seafloor. The walls curve inward here, creating a natural arena, and the floor slopes gently toward a central pit so deep that its bottom is invisible. The rock around the pit is smooth and polished, as though countless bodies have passed over it, wearing it down over ages. From the depths of the pit comes a sound unlike any you've heard so far, a rolling, throaty resonance that rises and falls in long, slow intervals. It is not a hum, not a knock, but something closer to a drawn-out exhalation, like the sigh of a world too ancient to care about the surface above. The sound carries with it a faint tremor in the water, and with each pulse you feel your own heartbeat adjusting, unconsciously falling into sync with the rhythm. The shadows at the edge of the pit shift. At first you think it's just the movement of sediment stirred by the sound, but then the shadows separate, resolving into forms. The first that emerges is immense, but not in the long serpentine way of the predators you've seen before. This one is broad, its body shaped like a living shield, with a flattened head and eyes set wide apart on either side. Its armor is layered in overlapping plates, each worn but unbroken, the edges serrated like the rim of a blade. It rises part way from the pit, and settles just at the edge, watching the water beyond. Another follows, and another, until the edge of the pit is ringed with these armored sentinels. They remain motionless, their great tails lying limp against the slope, their eyes unblinking. The sound from below continues, steady and unbroken, as if the pit itself is breathing. Your focus shifts to the water above the pit, where faint lights appear, small at first, then multiplying, drifting downward in a slow cascade. They are not living creatures, but fragments of something reflective, tumbling lazily through the water. They catch the faint glow of bioluminescent organisms clinging to the arena walls, flashing briefly before sinking toward the depths. The armored sentinels do not react until the first of the lights vanishes into the pit. Then, without warning, they shift in perfect unison, lowering their heads and raising their tails in a slow, deliberate display. The motion is silent, but carries a weight of meaning, a signal, a readiness, perhaps even a warning. The sound from the pit changes, the drawn-out exhalations tightening into shorter, more forceful bursts. From below a shape begins to rise. At first it's just a darker patch against the blackness, but it grows steadily, revealing a bulk so massive it makes the sentinels look small. The first thing you see clearly is its head, wide and angular, its mouth lined not with rows of teeth, but with jagged ridges of bone. Its eyes are set deep, each one larger than a human torso, their dark pupils ringed with a faint unnatural glow. The body follows, thick and barrel-shaped, covered in skin that looks less like flesh and more like weathered stone. Across its back ridges rise and fall in irregular patterns, some sharp like spines, others rounded like ancient hills worn by time. It moves with an almost impossible slowness, as though the act of rising through the water is more ritual than necessity. The sentinels do not move as it passes them, their heads tracking its ascent with the measured calm of creatures who have seen this before. The giant turns slightly, revealing scars so deep they could have been carved by tectonic force, each one running across its armored hide, like a map of battles survived. As it reaches the rim of the pit, the giant halts. For a long silent moment, it hovers there, its presence filling the amphitheater like a living monument. Then it opens its mouth slightly, and the water trembles with a low thrumming note that reverberates through the bones scattered on the sea floor. The sentinels respond in kind, lowering their heads in a synchronized movement before returning to stillness. Without another sound, the giant turns and descends once more into the pit, vanishing into darkness as though it had never been there at all. The sentinels remain, their eyes watching the edge of the arena, their bodies once again motionless. The reflective fragments continue to drift downward, each vanishing into the depths until only darkness remains. You leave the amphitheater with the uneasy sense that you have witnessed a ritual not meant for outsiders, one that has played out in this place for longer than memory, under rules you will never fully understand. The corridor ahead curves out of sight, and the breathing rhythm of the water fades into the background once more. Exiting the amphitheater's ancient arena, you find yourself again in that narrowing canyon, the metallic sheen walls pressing close, with their jagged spines and grooved scars. The current pushes steadily onward, carrying with it a low undertone of that chamber's distant breath, a fading echo of the ritual you just witnessed. Here, though, the hum is different, subtler, woven under the rush of water through the cracks and crevices of the basalt. Tiny eddies swirl in the troughs at the canyon floor, lifting clouds of silt that drift lazily upward, as if the canyon itself is exhaling a sigh of relief. The walls rise steep and unbroken, but here and there you spot narrow fissures, vertical slits that disappear into blackness above. Faint glimmers of bioluminescent algae cling to their edges, creating pinpricks of pale green light. Within each fissure, a few small creatures drift and cling, tiny shrimp-like scavengers feeding on whatever nutrients the current delivers. They retreat at your approach, slipping deeper into the cracks before vanishing into darkness. Ahead, the canyon widens once more into a long, gently sloping plain blanketed in fine, pale sand. This stretch is almost eerily calm, the water moving in subtle ripples rather than the strong surges of the canyon proper. The light shifts here, a pale, diffuse glow that seems to come equally from above and below, casting no clear direction. Shadows ripple across the sand, the remains of drifting silt settling back into place. As you drift across the plain, you catch sight of something embedded part way in the sand, the curved tip of a massive spine, its surface pitted and worn smooth. You hover over it, brushing away the fine grains to reveal more. A long series of rib-like structures curving underground and disappearing into the plain. Their spacing suggests the remains of something colossal, perhaps another ancient behemoth, long since departed from these depths. You continue forward. Without warning, the plain tilts downward into a trough so broad it feels like the ocean floor's version of a canyon rim. The water grows colder here, and the light dims as you approach the edge. At the very brink, stained fragments of bone litter the sand, splintered shards that glint ghostly white. Some are sharp and angular, others rounded as if eroded over millennia. Below, the trough plunges into blackness, so complete it seems to swallow all light. A faint current rises from that depth, carrying with it silt and detritus, like an inverted waterfall. The particles drift upward in slow, spiraling columns, catching your light and then vanishing. From that darkness comes the first rumble, a low, sustained vibration that resonates through the sand beneath your feet. It grows steadily, merging with the hum you've carried here, until the two become indistinguishable. The vibration pulses in long waves, and the very walls of the plain seem to shimmer in response. Then a shape emerges from the blackness, a head, broad and armored, tilting upward slowly as though testing the water. The eyes appear next, huge, dark, reflective, before the rest of the body follows. It ascends in deliberate segments, massive pectoral fins that push apart the silt clouds, a thick barrel of muscle rising into view, ridged spines catching faint glimmers of bioluminescence. As the creature clears the brink, it reveals itself fully an ancient guardian of the deep, built like a living fortress. Its scales overlap in plate-like sections, each marked by deep gouges and pale scars. The head bears long ridges that flare outward like a crown, the eyes set beneath a bony brow that gives it an expression of silent authority. It pauses at the rim, hovering more than swimming, as though surveying the plain from on high. Below its powerful jaws, tendrils of what might once have been gill filaments drift in the current, glowing with a faint bioluminescent blue. These are not for feeding, but for sensing, the creature's way of reading the water for approaching life. Your own breathing seems loud in that charged silence. Then, with a gentle sweep of its fins, the giant tilts and begins to descend back into the trough, its course taking it down and out of sight into the black. The vibration lessens, replaced by the hush of settling silt, but you remain at the edge, watching the rising particles until they too fade away. Turning your gaze along the length of the plain, you realize that the land here is carved by many paths, old channel cuts, ridges of bone and grooves where giants have scraped their way across the sand. It feels like a crossroads of the deep, a place where the rulers of the abyss gather, move on, and leave their mark before vanishing into the black. As you follow the current onward, the pale glow returns, and the canyon walls reappear in the distance, beckoning you forward into the next stretch of this submerged world. Beyond the trough's rim, The pale plain gives way to a series of low, rolling hills, sculpted from a mixture of sand and solidified sediment. These undulations are crossed by shallow gullies, each a path carved over countless eons by shifting currents and buried tectonic tremors. The water here is cooler still, and the light takes on a metallic sheen, casting every shape in high contrast relief. As you glide over the crest of the first hill, you catch sight of a drifting school of plankton that pulses in unison, creating an ethereal curtain of pale light. Their slow flirting motion seems to beckon you deeper into the hills. You descend into one of the gullies, the walls narrowing until they rise like the sides of a shallow trough. The floor is strewn with debris, fragmented shells, driftwood-like spines, and the corroded remnants of rusted metal, relics from ships long ago swallowed by the deep. Among these, you spot the skeletal remains of a creature far larger than any modern vessel could contain. A sprawling vertebral column encrusted in coral, ribs jutting skyward like the ribs of a giant beast frozen in time. The fossils are partly buried, their edges softened by sediment, yet unmistakably once living fabric. As you admire the ancient bones, the hum in the water shifts, deeper, more insistent. A tremor ripples through the sandy floor, sending tiny grains dancing in spidery patterns. The gullies echo with a low rumble, as though the earth itself has stirred. Then from deeper within the gully system, a shape emerges, a long, sinuous body that seems to flow through the water, as though it were made of liquid shadow. Its scales are dark and iridescent, catching the light in shifting colors of blue-green. It glides past you at eye level, the curve of its head narrowing into a tapered snout, lined with rows of needle-like teeth. Along its flanks, dorsal fins ripple in slow waves, each fin separated by a gap of smooth reflective skin. The creature's movement is silent, except for the soft hiss of displaced water, yet every pulse of its body sends a subtle vibration through your suit. Smaller fish dart around its form, feeding on the clouds of sediment it stirs, but never venturing closer than a few body lengths. You follow it through the gully's winding turns, where the walls occasionally open onto small side chambers filled with delicate coral gardens. Here branching gorgonians sway like ghostly trees, and vibrant sponges dot the walls in shades of purple and orange. Tiny crustaceans scuttle across the coral, their transparent shells catching flecks of bioluminescent glow. The predator ignores these pockets of life, its focus solely on the winding path ahead. Suddenly the gully opens into a vast shallow basin, where the hills recede into a wide plain once more. In the center lies a solitary rock outcrop, its surface pocked with holes like a sponge, each hole home to clusters of anemones and brittle stars. The sinuous hunter circles the outcrop, its body forming a living spiral as it assesses its surroundings. You hover just above, watching as it pauses mid-spiral, its head tilting slightly as if listening for something. Moments pass in tense stillness, then the creature shifts again, its body flattening against the plane as if to vanish into the sand. You remain motionless, heart pounding, as the signature silhouette begins to blur and fade, the dark scales transitioning back into the background grey of the seafloor. When it finally disappears, the only evidence of its passage is a faint trail of disturbed sediment and the gentle ripple of the anemones still swaying in the current. The plain's surface is undisturbed once more, but there is no illusion of emptiness. The orchids of coral gardens, the fossil bones, and the faint hum still echo in your senses. You drift onward across the hills, following the shallow valleys that wind like veins across the basin, each one promising new encounters with life that has thrived in solitude until now. As you crest the final hill, a vast cavern mouth appears at the base of the cliffs ahead. The opening is wide and dark, the edges lined with crystalline mineral growths that glint subtly, evidence of hydrothermal vents within. From the cavern comes a faint plume of bubbles, rising in slow rhythmic pulses that match the ever-present hum. This, you realize, is another crossroads, a gateway to unseen depths and thermal energies that sustain entirely different ecosystems. The hunter you followed will not go this way. It prefers the open plains and coral pockets. But for you the choice is clear, to enter the cavern and discover what other ancient mysteries the sea has hidden in its warm, dark heart. The cavern mouth yawns like an open wound in the basalt wall, its edges encrusted with pale mineral crystals that glow faintly in the dim light. A thin plume of bubbles ascends from within, rising in slow, regular bursts, as though marking a heartbeat. You drift closer, the water cooling abruptly at the threshold. The current here is erratic, sometimes pulling you inward, sometimes pushing you back, an invisible gatekeeper testing your resolve. Within the cavern, the walls narrow rapidly, forcing the water into tight channels that twist and turn beyond sight. The glow from the mineral growths grows brighter, illuminating columns of stone that arch overhead, like the ribcage of some ancient leviathan. Between these columns, plumes of heated water hiss from unseen vents, carrying with them clouds of mineral-rich particles that swirl in shimmering halos. The water here tastes sharp, metallic, an acrid tang that lingers on your tongue. As you ascend into the cavern's interior, the temperature rises perceptibly, and strange life begins to appear. Clusters of tube worms cling to vent openings, their feathery gills pulsing in the hot currents like ghostly flowers. Nearby, brittle stars cling to smooth rock faces, their arms waving gently to catch drifting morsels. But these are mere preludes to the giants that lurk in the thermal haze. From a side fissure comes the first movement, a vast flattened body sliding into view. Its skin is mottled in shades of rust and charcoal, patterned like the vent chimneys themselves. Along its sides, rows of chemosynthetic bacteria glow with a soft red luminescence, feeding on the minerals exhaled from the Earth's core. The creature's head emerges fully only after its entire bulk is visible, and you realize its jaws are lined not with teeth, but with ridged calcified plates, an adaptation for crushing the hard shells of vent-dwelling crustaceans. It moves in slow, deliberate undulations, each motion stirring the vent currents into roiling clouds of steam and mineral dust. Its eyes, or what pass for eyes, are vestigial, small and glazed, having never needed vision in this eternal night. Instead, sensory tentacles along its head probe the water, tasting, feeling, mapping every chemical signature. You follow alongside it for a time, watching as it navigates the labyrinth of vent chimneys, pausing to press its plates against clusters of brittle stars and vent crabs before moving on. Further in, the cavern opens into a vast dome where the roof arches high above, and the floor slopes gently into a central pit. The mineral crystals here form massive stalactites and stalagmites, some fused into columns that glint with metallic luster. Here the water is hottest, buoyed by currents rising from the abyss below. As you drift through, you feel the heat press against your suit, the sensors warning you of approaching maximum tolerances. It is in this dome that you witness the greatest marvel, a congregation of giants unlike any before. A dozen of the vent-dwelling behemoths gather around a cluster of smokers, vent chimneys spewing superheated water and minerals. They circle in slow synchronization, their plates scraping the mineral walls, sending cascades of crystals raining down like fiery embers. Their rhythmic motion creates a deafening roar, the hiss of steam, the clink of falling crystals, and the grinding of calcified shells echoing through the dome. At the center, one giant positions itself directly above an active vent. It lowers its head, funnels the superheated plume through its gill plates in a flared display, and the surrounding creatures respond in kind, each taking a turn to draw the vent's breath. The water around them glows red with chemosynthetic bacteria, illuminating their forms like living beacons in the darkness. It is a feast and a ritual, a communion with the Earth's fiery heart, that sustains life in this forgotten depth. As the ritual subsides, the giants drift apart, their bodies bleeding heat into the cavern before gliding back into hidden fissures. The steam settles, and silence returns, broken only by the distant hiss of smaller vents and the faint drip of condensation from the crystal formations above. You hover at the edge of the dome, awestruck by the scale and grace of what you have witnessed. Creatures evolved to harness the planet's inner fire, living monuments to life's stubborn persistence in the face of extremes. Reluctantly you turn to leave, the cavern's passage narrowing once more into the channel that brought you here. As you exit, the heat gives way to the cooler brine-laced water of the open seafloor, and the glow of vent bacteria fades behind you. The canyon beyond welcomes you back with its steady current, guiding you onward to the next chapter of this submerged odyssey. As you emerge from the vent cavern, the waters cool and the current steadies once more, carrying you out into a vast plain of undulating sand. The light here shifts from warm glow to muted grey-blue, as though you have crossed an invisible threshold between two worlds. The plain extends in every direction, broken only by low rolling dunes and occasional ridges of hardened sediment. Fine silt drifts across the floor in slow eddies, creating shifting patterns that fade as quickly as they form. You drift along one such dune, studying the delicate spirals left by settling silt, when a sudden tremor steals through the water. It begins as a faint vibration underfoot, building in intensity, until it feels as though the very ground is humming. The dunes ahead shudder, and then part, revealing a massive shape sliding upward, the head and shoulders of a predator so broad it blots out the horizon. Its skin glistens wetly, patterned in irregular mottles of dark and light that break its outline in the pale water. As it lifts fully into view, you see that it is more than twice your length in height. Its shoulders sweep back into pectoral fins wider than the span of a small boat, each movement pushing torrents of sand and silt away in great, lazy arcs. Its head is crowned by robust ridges, and its eyes, large, unblinking and rimmed with scar tissue, sweep the plain with a watchful calm. The predator's jaws open slightly, revealing rows of serrated teeth, capable of shearing through armor. It glides forward, the dunes collapsing in its wake, the trembling vibrations echoing across the plain. Smaller, agile creatures dart from beneath its bulk, only to disappear into fissures too narrow for the giant to follow. As it moves, the water feels denser, as though its presence compacts the currents into tighter bands. You follow at a respectful distance, observing how it navigates the dunes. Its path is not straight but deliberate, never aimless. Every few strokes it pauses, probing the sand with sensitive protrusions near its snout, tasting the water for hidden life. It shifts slightly, then resumes its journey, crossing a shallow depression where the dunes fade into rippled silt. Here the water is cooler, and the predator's heat signatures, picked up by your instruments, fade before brightening again as it ascends a new dune. You drift alongside, noticing the intricate texturing along its flank, faint scars, lines of healed wounds, patches of roughened skin where barnacles once clung. These marks tell a story of survival in a world ruled by size and strength. Suddenly the ground ahead erupts in a plume of sand. A smaller but still colossal shape bursts upward, another predator, built for speed, its sleek form glistening. Its mouth opens in a silent roar, jaws snapping shut on a shoal of mid-sized fish that scatter before you can blink. The bigger predator halts, tensing as the newcomer circles, a silent invitation to contest territory. For long seconds they hold that standoff, one broad and powerful, the other lithe and swift. Currents whip between them, stirring the silt into swirling eddies. Then, without a dramatic lunge, they separate, an unspoken agreement reached. The lithe predator veers into a nearby ravine, and the broad-backed one resumes its path across the dune field, as if nothing interrupted its methodical patrol. You continue drifting along, mind racing from what you've just witnessed. The plain here feels alive, not with static calm, but with hidden tensions and alliances, with rituals of dominance played out in silence and sand. Each dune you pass becomes less uniform, etched with faint grooves where predators have passed, and dotted with small impact craters where heavier bodies landed. Ahead, the plain gives way to a low ridge topped with jagged sedimentary rock. You ascend, rising above the dunes until the ridge crest frames an open expanse, a great crater-like depression, whose floor shimmers with a strange phosphorescence. From its center rises a faint plume of glowing water, as though bioluminescent organisms are congregating in massive blooms. The predator you followed pauses at the ridge, head lifted, watching the crater's glow. After a moment, it dips again and crosses the ridge toward the phosphorescent light. You follow, curiosity and caution entwined in every movement. Descending into the depression, you find its floor strewn with broken shells, shimmering exoskeleton fragments, and the occasional glint of metallic debris, strange detritus from a long-forgotten age. The glow here is soft, pulsating in waves that ripple across the debris field. As the predator approaches, the glow intensifies, revealing large, flattened creatures swaying like living carpets. They undulate in rhythm, filtering the water for nutrients in a silent ballet. The predator passes among them without predation, an odd truce between hunter and filter feeder. The broad pectoral fins glide inches above their backs, not causing even a ripple. You hover at the edge of this surreal tableau, awed by the scale and stasis of life here, where predator and prey share space in a fragile agreement. After several minutes, the glow dims as the filter feeders settle, and the basin grows still. The predator pauses, nodding its head once, then slowly turns and vanishes up the slope it came down. You watch until its broad silhouette melts into the dune horizon, leaving the creatures and the glowing crater in peaceful stillness once more. Rising from the depression, you catch one last glimpse. The dunes stretch away like the sea of sand, the ridge behind you silhouetted against the pale haze. The crater's soft glow fades into memory, and you drift onward into the uncharted reaches beyond, carrying with you the echoes of giants and the silent agreements forged in the deep shifting sands. Beyond the ridge where the glowing crater lay, the dunes stretch out into an expanse of sand, so uniform it feels like the ocean floor has given way entirely to a desert under the sea. The current here is a slow, languid pull, drifting you gently over the soft slopes. The light is a diffuse grey-blue that seems to come from within the water itself, illuminating the sands in an even glow. Every small detail stands out. The fine ripples etched into each dune, the occasional fragment of shell half buried at their crests, and the faint tracks of creatures that passed here long before. As you glide across the dunes, an abrupt shift in the current draws your attention, a gentle but insistent push from below, as though the sand is rising to meet you. You descend slightly, following the pulse, and discover a shallow depression lined with curious stone pillars. Each pillar is spire-like, tapering to a point yet worn smooth by constant abrasion. Their bases are encrusted with brittle corals, and their tips catch the faint light, glowing with a soft white luminescence. The space between them is almost circular, forming a natural amphitheater on the sand. Hovering in its center is a remarkable sight, a massive creature resting motionless, its broad body settled into the depression like an island. Its skin, a tapestry of pale ivory and dark mottles, blends so perfectly with the sand that only the faint outlines of its scaled ridges reveal its presence. Along its flanks, barnacles cluster in thick colonies, their sharp edges grazing the spires as the creature sways ever so slightly in the current. For a long moment you watch as it remains utterly still, breathing in slow, imperceptible pulses. Then, without warning, the depression's floor ripples outward in concentric circles as the creature exhales bubbles from beneath its rigid plates. Each bubble blooms slowly in the water before drifting toward the surface, trailing wisps of mineral particles that catch the light like drifting snow. The spires vibrate faintly with each exhalation, and the amphitheater resonates with a low rolling hum that seems to emanate from the creature's core. As you drift closer, you realize that this being is filtering the sand itself, expelling fine silt and sorting the grains within its massive gill cavities. Tiny scavengers, shrimp-like crustaceans and brittle stars, dash into the outflow, feeding on the organic detritus the creature discards. They work in rapid, darting bursts, weaving around the spires in a frenetic dance that contrasts with the giant's slow, ponderous rhythm. Then another presence announces itself, a rolling vibration from the desert floor beyond the amphitheater. You turn to see the crest of a nearby dune collapse inward, and a vast body slides upward, revealing itself in cascading arcs of sand. This newcomer is leaner yet equally immense, its skin a deep charcoal streaked with silver lines that shimmer as it moves. The two giants regard each other with slow, deliberate eye movements. No aggression, merely acknowledgement. The newly arrived creature circles the amphitheater's edge, its long tail tracing patterns in the sand. It pauses near one spire, pressing a massive pectoral fin against it, and vibrating it gently, sending thin shockwaves of sand sifting away. The first creature reacts in kind, its gill exhalations pulsing faster for a moment, and the spires hum back in resonance. Their exchanges form a muted conversation of vibrations and currents, a dialect older than words. As if by mutual understanding, one giant descends back into the depression, while the other ascends the dune, trailing plumes of sand in its wake. You follow the ascender as it emerges onto the crest, then tilts its head to survey the dunes beyond. In the distance, more ripples appear on the horizon, signs of further arrivals. The dune giant moves on, cutting across the plain toward a cluster of bone fragments half buried in the sand. Among them lie the shattered remains of a colossal vertebra, splintered into pieces. The creature slows and lowers its head, brushing away grains to expose a darker interior. Its jaws open in a deliberate arc, and it bites into the bone, grinding shards between calcified plates. Muscles ripple along its neck as it feeds, each chew sending faint tremors through the plain. Small scavengers swarm the fragments, competing for the pieces the giant discards. They cluster under its jaws, then scatter when its massive tail sweeps across the sand to dislodge the hardest bits. The feeding ritual lasts minutes, but in the timeless stretch of the deep, a minute is no more than a breath. With its hunger sated, the dune giant rises and continues its steady trek across the desert seabed. You drift alongside for a time, watching as it crisscrosses the dunes, each movement inscribing new grooves in the sands. The sunken desert is alive with these migrations, and you sense that the patterns of movement here map a network of feeding grounds, breeding halls and long-forgotten lairs. Finally it reaches another ridge, and from there the dune giant tilts downward into a deep trough carved into layered sedimentary rock. The current tugs you after it, and as you descend you notice the rock layers are filled with tiny fossils, bivalves, worm tubes and fragments of shelled mollusks. It is as though the trough itself is a tomb preserving the ebb and flow of ancient ecosystems. At the bottom, the trough opens onto a broad shelf, flat, featureless and ominously still. The dune giant glides onto it, coming to rest like a massive stone carving. You hover a moment, listening to the hush, feeling the smoothness of the shelf beneath. Then silently, another shadow slips onto the edge, sleeker, faster, and darker. It circles the sleeping giant once, then vanishes into the gloom beyond. You linger until the dunes return into view, and the plain above glows faintly under the scattered bioluminescence of the spire colonies. The desert shifts with each breath of the giants you followed, and you continue onward, drawn by the promise of more ancient mysteries waiting among the sands. The shelf gives way gradually to a steep slope, the sand thinning until the rock beneath becomes exposed. A vast sheet of slate-grey stone pocked with shallow depressions and streaked with mineral veins that shimmer faintly. Here the water is cooler still, the currents stirring the rust-coloured algae mats that cling to the bare rock. As you descend the slope, you notice small oases of life tucked into cracks, clusters of tube worms, feathery hydroids, and sponges shaped like fluted columns. These pockets pulse with bioluminescent glow, casting an otherworldly light on the surrounding stone, and creating islands of brightness in the grey sea. Ahead, the slope ends at a sheer cliff face, its base obscured by an inky darkness. The descent into the abyss below feels like peering into an ancient yawning void, one that has never known sunlight. As you approach the edge, the bioluminescent oases fade behind you, replaced by drifting clouds of silt that move in slow waves, as though the seabed itself is breathing. You hover at the brink, heart pounding, and then in the gloom below, a faint glow appears, a single steady point of light, like a star caught in the deep. The point grows brighter and more numerous until you realize it is not one light but dozens, each pulsing gently in a pattern. They form a field of luminescence, an underwater constellation rising from the darkness. As your eyes adjust, the shapes behind the lights resolve into massive balloon-like creatures drifting upward in a silent migration. Their rounded bodies are ringed with hundreds of glowing nodules, each a bioluminescent lure that attracts plankton and small crustaceans. The creatures rise slowly, their inflated bellies reflecting the soft glow back into the void in kaleidoscopic patterns. Below them, in the deeper dark, a larger shape begins to move, a wall of muscle and shadow that follows the glowing swarm with deliberate precision. As it emerges, You see its head, a broad flattened snout framed by sensory tentacles that flicker with bioluminescent tips. Its skin is slate grey, but patterned with iridescent streaks that pulse in time with the swarm's lights, as though it can interpret and respond to their signals. The predator's eyes are half closed, betraying a calm confidence born of countless hunts in this abyss. The glowing swarm reaches the edge of the cliff and drifts over you in a cascade of light, each bell-shaped body emitting a soft hum, the bioluminescent organs pulsating as they filter the water. The predator follows, weaving through the lights with careful precision, avoiding direct contact yet never losing sight of its quarry. Its movements stir the clouds of silt, sending trailing veils of sand twirling in the glow. You descend with them, drawn by the spectacle, until you are level with the predator's pectoral fins, vast undulating membranes that channel the bioluminescent current into feeding lanes. From this vantage, you see smaller predators weaving among the glowing masses, snapping up individual plankton feeders with quick, precise strikes. It is a feeding frenzy, unlike any you have witnessed. A silent ballet of light and shadow, predator and prey united in a dance as old as the deep. The cliff face looms above, and the dark trench yawns behind. You drift in the middle of this cosmic display, the hum of lights and the soft thrum of fins resonating in your chest. The predators work with uncanny synchronicity. When one strikes, the lights around it dim momentarily, then pulse back to life in a ripple effect that communicates the catch to the others. The larger hunter selects its targets with care, never overexerting itself, its movements economical and precise. After several minutes, the feeding slows. The swarm's numbers dwindle as bodies ascend past you toward shallower depths, their lights fading as they rise. The predators settle onto the cliff's edge, their bodies pressed against the rock as they digest their feast. You watch as one opens its gill chambers, exhaling a shower of silt and filtered water into the dark below, sending plumes cascading down the cliff face. When the last of the luminescent swarm has drifted away, the predators finally move, sliding backward into the trench that gave them life. Their bodies vanish into the black as the lights of the deep field fade, leaving only the drifting silt and the muted echo of their presence. You linger at the trench's mouth, the stone walls around you silent once more. The bioluminescent oases reappear to either side, their glow faint but steady, seeming to welcome you back into the cold grey expanse. The currents here are gentle, guiding you along the shelf toward the next great mystery. With one last glance into the abyssal darkness, you rise up the slope, leaving behind the cosmic dance of light and shadow, and continue your journey into the unending depths of this ancient forgotten ocean. The slope levels out as you leave the trench, the basalt and sediment, giving way to an expanse of fractured plateaus, their jagged edges smoothed in places by drifting sands. The water here is clear and cold, filtered through countless layers of rock and silt above. Faint shafts of light from distant vents pierce the gloom, illuminating pulsing clouds of tiny iridescent plankton that drift like flitting motes of glow. The plateaus rise and fall in gentle steps, creating terraces that resemble a great submerged amphitheater, carved by time itself. You drift over the first terrace and peer down into a shallow depression ringed with columns of porous rock. Each column is studded with clusters of sponges and anemones, their tentacles waving in the current like seagrasses in a primordial dance. Below, a stand of tall reed-like tube worms sways in a synchronized pulse, their plumes brushing the silt-streaked floor. A dozen translucent shrimp dart among them, picking at the tubes and vanishing into the dark bases. Leaving the depression, you follow a gentle incline up to the next terrace, where the currents shift unexpectedly. The water here moves in intersecting streams, some rushing with heat from hidden vents, others cooler and slower, flowing from the trench behind. At the point where they meet, the contrast of temperatures creates boiling eddies of turbulence that churn the water into swirling columns of mist-like silt. Small crustaceans and fish gather here, drawn by the stirring nutrients, darting in and out of the churning clouds in a frantic ballet. From this vantage you see shapes moving at the far edge of the terrace, solid silhouettes breaking the pale glow of drifting plankton. As you approach, the details grow: two massive creatures grazing on the crustacean tribes, their bodies curved low, heads sweeping side to side in methodical strokes. Their mouths are wide and flat, lined with rows of comb-like plates, adapted for sifting the tiny life that swirls in the currents. Between their gill slits, you see plates of mineralized ridges, slowly filtering the enriched water into oxygen and food. The grazers move in parallel, never too close, their arcs matching so precisely it seems choreographed. Every so often, one pauses and tilts its head, sending a pulse of filtered water through its gills that sends surrounding particles dancing in coruscating halos. The other responds, tilting in turn, the pair breathing currents back and forth to stir the plane's surface. In their wake, the sand smooths itself as though massaged, erasing tracks and leaving only gentle undulations to mark their passage. You drift beside them, captivated by their serene communal feeding ritual. Their pace is unhurried, but the water around them glows faintly in bioluminescent afterblazes, a shimmering trail that lingers long after they pass. Small predators lurk at the edges of the stirred currents, sleek, darting shapes waiting for scraps stirred free by the grazer's movement. Occasionally one lunges in, snatching a disoriented shrimp or fish before darting back into shadow. Eventually the grazers reach the far rim of the terrace and ascend to the next level upward. You follow, passing through a mist of drifting silt that swirls around you like spectral curtains. At the top of this rise, the plateau opens into a broad flat plain marked by giant fossilized shells, remnants of creatures that once thrived here. Their forms are half buried, overgrown by new life, corals branching from openings, tube worms colonizing interior cavities, and sponges draping like tapestries across ribs. The plain itself hums with subtle movement. Tiny creatures flicker between the shells, and the currents swirl in gentle eddies around each fossil's arch. Then the surface shifts, a sudden depression near one shell, as if the ground itself is exhaling. Drill down, and a massive shape emerges, an enormous predator that slithers from beneath the shell, breaking the stillness with the quiet power of its muscles. Its body is long and tapered, dorsal fins rippling in slow hypnotic waves that catch the glow of the plankton. This predator pauses at the plane's center, coiling around a fossilized shell like a living vine. Its head lifts, and you see eyes that gleam with intelligence. It circles the shell twice, then unfurls and glides away in a sinuous arc, the plane's surface rippling in complex patterns as it moves. You follow its path toward a distant spire of rock, tall, slender, and topped with corals that sway like banners in a slow breeze. As the predator reaches the spire, another shape drifts into view, a companion, smaller but equally sleek. The two meet in a silent greeting, circling each other once, then separating as if on shared patrol. They glide in parallel again, weaving between the shells and the corals, their patterns mirroring the rhythms of predator and prey in a dance older than the seabed itself. Above them, the plateau's rim is crowned with a forest of slender rock pinnacles, their pointed tips piercing the gloom. Between the pinnacles, shafts of pale light descend from unseen openings above, creating columns of illumination that spotlight drifting clouds of silt and plankton. A final encounter unfolds within one such beam. A tiny agile predator darts in among the grazing giants, seizes a disoriented shrimp, and retreats in a flash. You pause in that luminous shaft, the pulse of the plateau's life resonating through your suit. Below, the grazers circle again. The shell predator coils back into darkness, and the micro-predators vanish into the shadowed spaces. The plateau's rhythms resume. Currents stir, plankton drift, life thrives in the slow intimacy of the deep. With the grand patterns observed, and the giants and grazers left in their ancient routines, you turn toward the plateau's edge, where a final rise hints at the approach of a different realm, a submerged canyon rimmed with crystalline walls. There new mysteries await, and you drift onward, guided by the subtle hum of the ocean's endless stories. The plateau's edge falls away in a sheer cliff of crystalline stone, each facet catching faint light and refracting it into shifting patterns that dance across the water. The current here spirals downward, as if funneled into a great cauldron below, carrying silt and sediment in lazy swirls that glint like stardust. You drift toward the brink, the crystalline wall rising several meters above before plunging into shadow, an impenetrable void from which the water's song emerges as a low, melodic hum. Descending along the crystal face, you pass patches of luminescent algae that coat the stone in pale blues and greens, their fronds waving gently in the tunneled flow. Tiny fish, translucent and jewel-bright, shelter beneath overhangs, darting out to feed on passing plankton before vanishing back into the hidden nooks. Here and there, the crystal has fractured, leaving triangular windows into deeper chambers where vaporous clouds of warm water drift upward from unseen vents. Further down, the spiraling current deposits you into a broad chamber lined with towering crystal spires. These spires rise from the floor like frozen lightning, their edges razor-thin and polished smooth by eons of flow. Between them, the water is a tapestry of drifting particles, microscopic plankton, mineral dust, and the glints of broken shells. Bioluminescent bacteria bloom in shimmering colonies along the spire bases, painting the chamber floor with delicate moving patterns of light. In the center of this crystalline grove, you see the first of the giants, a colossal creature whose body seems sculpted to glide among the spires. Its skin is translucent in places, revealing a network of blood vessels pulsing with bioluminescent plasma that echoes the bacterial glow. Rows of fin-like appendages fan from its sides, each edged with filaments that undulate in unison, propelling it in silent, graceful arcs. Its head is flattened and broad, with sensory pits like ancient runes tracing along its brow, and its large reflective eyes study the spires, as though reading their crystalline codes. It weaves through the spires with such finesse that it brushes past them without a scrape, each movement measured and deliberate, as though it has memorized every twist and angle of the chamber. You follow at a respectful distance, observing how its gill slits expand and contract, drawing the mineral-rich water through its body, and exhaling filtered plumes that shimmer like ghostly veils. Nearby, another creature emerges from behind a cluster of spires, a partner, smaller but similarly adorned in translucent skin and filigree fins. The two glide together in silent synchronization, circling each other in a slow ballet that weaves between the towering crystals. Every so often, one pauses, extending a fin tip to tap a spire, sending ripples of light through the bacterial colonies that cascade in shifting fractals across the chamber floor. As the pair completes their circuit, a third giant descends from the darkness above, a hulking form with ridged armor like plates along its back and massive pectoral fins that beat slowly like a drum. Its arrival shifts the chamber's balance, the spiraling currents widening into gentle eddies as the newcomers carve paths through the stillness. The delicate duo yields space, retreating to the fringe of the chamber, giving room for the armored behemoth to pass. It moves with incredible power for its size, each stroke of its pectoral fins generating a forceful push that sends shimmering plumes of mineral dust into the water. As it passes, you feel the shift in pressure, a tangible reminder of the vast mass moving through. Its head bears long, branching tentacles embellished with luminescent tips that cast fleeting sparks of light against the crystal walls. The tentacles wave gently, probing the air and sensing the chamber's boundaries. The armored giant stops at the chamber's center, standing still in the swirling currents like a sentinel of antiquity. The glowing plankton around its gills flares to life, flooding the space with a fiery glow that reflects off the crystals in dazzling patterns. For a moment you watch in awe as the interplay of living light and stone creates an otherworldly cathedral of color and motion. Then, as though summoned by some silent signal, the trio reunites. The armored giant begins to exhale long streams of silt-laden water from its gill chambers, and the delicate duo glide over to join, their bodies illuminated by the glowing plume. Together they form a slow-moving procession that sweeps through the spire forest, each creature's movement stirring the bacterial colonies into rhythmic pulses. The effects cascade, a living wave of glow that rolls across the chamber floor and climbs the walls in ascending arcs. You drift within this procession, feeling the hum of collective presence, the shared heartbeat of giants converging in the crystal grove. The experience transcends mere observation. It is an invitation into an ancient ceremony of life, a communion between stone, water, and creature that has persisted since time before memory. As the procession completes a full circuit, The creatures disperse one by one, each retreating into the spires, or ascending toward the chamber's narrow exits. The currents reclaim their spiral pattern, the glowing plumes subside, and the spire forest settles into silence once more. You linger, letting the echoes of this crystalline congregation resonate within you, knowing you have witnessed a ritual older than any human story. Rising from the chamber, you drift toward one of the narrow exits. The crystal walls give way to basalt again, and the current carries you onward, the echo of the hum fading into the broader song of the deep. Ahead awaits the final expanse before the surface, a path through underwater arches carved by forgotten rivers of stone. You go, carrying with you the memory of light and life woven into crystal dreams. Emerging from the crystalline chamber's exit, you find yourself drifting through a tunnel, carved from ancient basalt, its ceiling lost to darkness and its walls smooth from the constant passage of water. Small fissures leak faint glows of bioluminescent bacteria, creating a ribbon of pale blue light that guides your path. The current here is gentle, sweeping you forward, as if ushering you towards some hidden destination. Every so often, you brush past clusters of sponges and hydroids, clinging to the rock, their feathery tentacles waving in greeting, before returning to their silent vigil. The tunnel opens into a vast archway that stretches overhead, like a stone rainbow, each arch formed from layered strata of rock, browned and streaked by mineral veins. In the soft glow you can see the edges of each band, shimmering with deposits of iron and copper, their metallic traces catching the bioluminescent light in delicate flashes. Beyond the arches lies a wide plain of smooth stone pocked with shallow pools of water, each pool a miniature ecosystem, reflecting the pale luminescence above. You glide across the plain, your presence causing ripples that dance across each pool's mirrored surface. In some, tiny crustaceans scuttle at your approach. In others, feathery anemones open tentacles to greet the passing current. But the pools are merely preludes to the sight ahead. At the far end of the plain, a ring of colossal arches emerges from the stone floor, each carved in perfect symmetry, and standing on pillars taller than a modern ship's mast. The ring's scale is such that you must ascend slightly to fully appreciate its span, an architectural marvel etched into the seabed by forces long forgotten. Circling the ring, you notice faint inscriptions etched along the pillars, patterns of grooves and ridges that seem too deliberate to be natural. Some resemble spirals, others are geometric lattices, whether crafted by some long-extinct species, or formed by peculiar erosion. They pulse with an uncanny rhythm when the bioluminescent light catches them just right, as though the stone itself is alive with hidden meaning. At the center of the arch ring lies a depression filled with swirling currents, a whirlpool of silt and drift that contrasts with the stillness of the surrounding pools. You hover at the brink, watching as the eddy spins in silent motion, sucking down flotsam and microfauna alike. Within the swirl, the water darkens, and you feel a pull, gentle, insistent, beckoning you closer. Then from the depths of the whirlpool, a long, slender body rises, a creature built for gliding through narrow channels and sudden descents. Its skin is banded in contrasting shades of dark slate and pale ivory, the colors flowing in sinewy patterns that echo the stone inscriptions. Along its spine, a row of delicate fins unfurls like a great feathered quill, each fin undulating to maintain balance in the swirling water. It ascends slowly, passing through the center of the arch ring and emerging onto the stone plain. Its head features elongated sensory barbels that trail behind in the current, twitching as if reading the chemical signatures of the water around it. Its eyes, large, reflective, and rimmed with a faint luminescent glow, sweep the arches with quiet curiosity. You follow as it emerges fully, the whirlpool's pull fading behind you. Beneath the arches, you drift close enough to see the intricate patterns above, their designs now more legible through the creature's perspective. Spirals that converge toward a single point, interlocking shapes that form endless tessellations, and slender glyphs that suggest some ancient language or code. The ribbon-finned creature pauses near one pillar, pressing its barbels against the grooves as if deciphering the patterns. As it does, the etched lines glow briefly with an inner light, illuminating a path deeper into the arches. You watch in awe as it glides forward, the pillars lighting up in sequence to mark its passage, a silent guide leading you toward an inner sanctum. Following the luminous trail, you drift between pillars whose inscriptions now shine in radiant patterns, waves of light moving down the stone like pulses of data. The current swirls gently here, dust motes dancing in the illuminated corridors. Soon you arrive at the inner sanctum, a circular chamber at the heart of the arch ring, its walls inscribed with continuous glyphs forming a complete circuit. At its center lies a smooth bowl-shaped depression, carved from the same crystalline stone you encountered earlier. The ribbon-finned creature enters first, lowering its head to the bowl's edge. It deposits a fragile translucent orb, a cluster of bioluminescent plankton bound by mucus into the center. The orb's glow spreads outward, illuminating the chamber in soft shifting hues. The creature then retreats, joining two others that emerge behind you, one slender and feathered like itself, the other broad-shouldered with plate-like scales. They form a semicircle around the bowl, their eyes fixed on the pulsing light. For several minutes the chamber remains silent save for the gentle hum of bioluminescence. Then a faint vibration begins beneath the stone floor. The inscribed glyphs along the walls glow in turn, each line lighting up as though interpreting the orb's presence. The bowl itself radiates a sweeping wave of light that arcs up the pillars and across the arches, illuminating every corner of the chamber in a radiant glow. The three creatures lean forward, sending synchronized vibrations through the water, soft clicks and pulses that resonate against the stone. The bowl's light responds, intensifying with each pulse, and the glyphs ripple in concentric circles. You feel the resonance in your bones, the hum of an ancient dialogue between creature and chamber. Then, as suddenly as it began, the pulse fades, the light dims to a gentle glow, the glyphs return to their baseline shimmer, and the chamber falls silent once more. The creatures withdraw their heads and drift away, one by one, each following a different exit corridor that spirals outward from the sanctum. Left alone in the circle of arches, you linger in the afterglow, aware that you have witnessed something beyond mere natural ritual, a communion between living being and living stone, encoded in patterns that bridge biology and geology. The world outside the arches waits, and you rise to follow one of the corridors, guided by the last glimmer of glyph-lit pathways, venturing onward into the ocean's final mysteries. The spiral corridor narrows once more, the glyph-lit walls closing around you in a tunnel, so tight your arms brush the etched stone on either side. The water here is still, the currents tamed into gentle eddies by the precise geometry of the passage. The glyphs pulse softly, guiding your way deeper into the underwater architecture, until the corridor opens abruptly into a vertical shaft. This shaft plunges straight down, its walls slick with algae and streaked with mineral veins. You begin a careful descent, the bioluminescent glyphs fading above as you sink into deeper shadow. The water grows noticeably colder, and the pressure mounts, pressing in from all sides. Tiny crustaceans cling to the walls, their transparent bodies flickering with bioluminescent spots that blink intermittently. Midway down the shaft, you pass a ledge where the rock gives way to a field of crystalline stalactites hanging from the ceiling. Long, delicate formations drift in the current like glass chandeliers, their tips tangled with strands of bioluminescent algae. As you drift past, a chorus of clicks and pulses begins, the same rhythmic language of the ribbon-finned creatures and armored giants, echoing from above. The stalactites resonate in response, producing a soft bell-like tone that vibrates through the water. You continue downward into darkness, relying on the faint glow of your instruments. At the bottom lies a vast chamber, its walls arching overhead out of sight. The floor is a mosaic of crystalline spires and basalt boulders, interspersed with deep pools of inky water. At the center stands a monolithic obelisk, its surface etched with glyphs far more intricate and dense than those in the arch ring. The obelisk glows with inner light, pulsing in sync with the distant clicks. Hovering beside it are three creatures, the ribbon-finned pair and the armored behemoth. They circle the obelisk in perfect formation, their pulses merging into a singular resonant song that hums through the chamber. The obelisk's glyphs respond, rippling up its length in waves of light. You drift close, entranced by the interplay of living song and living stone, an ancient ritual that seems to bind these beings to this subterranean shrine. Then, without warning, the humming intensifies into a crescendo. The obelisk unleashes a sudden flare of light, illuminating the entire chamber for a heartbeat before dimming back to its steady glow. The creatures pause, then break formation, retreating up the shaft with swift, purposeful movements. Their pulses echo in the darkness as they vanish, leaving the obelisk alone once more. In the aftermath, the chamber falls silent. The glyphs on the obelisk settle into a soft, continuous glow, and the pools reflect its light in dancing patterns. You linger at the edge of the shrine, feeling the residual hum in your bones, knowing that you have witnessed the deepest secret of the Archring's architects, a bond of life and stone woven in the ocean's darkest heart. Ascending back up the shaft, you follow the fading echo of the song until you return to the glyph-lit corridor. The passage now feels familiar, its curves guiding you toward the Archring's outer reaches. Emerging once more into that great circle of pillars, you pause to watch the patterns of light ripple across each pillar's face. The glyphs here glow softly, as if acknowledging your passage and the ritual you observed below. Drifting away from the Archring, you find the pillars give way to a field of ancient monoliths, tall, slender stones, whose surfaces are worn smooth by currents and time. Between them, the plain is strewn with strange artifacts, polished stone spheres, carved fragments bearing the same glyphs, and rows of standing slabs that recall markers or monuments. All are silent now, their purposes forgotten, their messages lost to the ages. You float among them like an archaeologist in a sunken necropolis, tracing glyph-carved lines with your gaze, imagining the hands that etched them and the voices that once sang their meanings. Minute bioluminescent flora cling to the stones, their gentle glow illuminating details in shafts of drifting silt, patterns of concentric spirals, interlocking knots, and branching fractals that evoke the forms of the deep itself. Ahead, the field ends at a narrow outlet, a natural arch where the rock has eroded away, forming a bridge overhead and a channel below. Beyond, you glimpse the open sea and shafts of pale light streaming down, marking the way home. But before leaving, you pause under the bridge to watch one final ceremony. A solitary ribbon-finned creature descends from above, depositing a cluster of glowing plankton against one monolith's base. The plankton adhere, pulsing in rhythm with a single glyph that flares to life. The creature departs, and the glyph's glow subsides into the network, as though welcoming the gift before resting again. At last, you turn to the open channel. The cold grey waters give way to the subtle warmth of shallower depths. The currents carry you upward, through drifts of plankton and past glimpses of reef-like rock outcrops where fish dart. Each pulse of the returning pressure reminds you of the giants below, of rituals woven in stone and song. Breaking through into the blue above, you rise toward the distant surface, leaving behind the depths where size knows no limit, where life's song is etched in glyphs and crystal, and where ancient beings gather beyond human sight. As the light grows stronger, and the world of air and waves approaches, you carry with you the memory of unspoken mysteries, their stories sung in pulses and inscribed in living stone, echoing forever in the heart of the ocean. The passage from the Archring's outer field carries you into an expansive canyon, lit by diffuse shafts of pale sunlight, filtering from shallower depths, far above. The walls are smooth, slate-grey basalt, streaked with veins of white calcite that gleam like rivers of ice. Tiny crabs cling in the cracks, their legs waving as they sift for drifting particles. Far ahead, across the canyon floor, you see the outline of massive boulders, remnants of cliff collapses, scattered like ancient ruins. You drift down into the canyon, drawn by a gentle cross-current that swirls at the base of the walls. As you descend, the light dims, and the water grows cooler. Fine silt drifts in lazy spirals from unseen vents, creating pale columns that cluster around the boulders. Each vent plume is home to hydroids and tube worms, their feathery tentacles pulsing in the current's dance. Amidst this gentle turbulence, a low pulse reverberates through the canyon walls, a muted echo of the deep. From the mist of silt emerges your first episode of ancient life, a slow-rising wall of undulating plates. The creature's back is broad, each plate overlapping like the shingles of a massive roof. Its mottled skin, patches of dark green, pale grey and rust, blends seamlessly with the canyon's rocky floor. As it lifts itself onto a boulder, its massive pectoral fins push aside clouds of silt and small stone fragments. You hover close, noting the barnacles, each the size of a man's hand, clinging rigidly to the plates. The creature raises its head, revealing eyes that glint with a quiet curiosity. Along its jaw run rows of blunt, crushing teeth, designed not for tearing flesh, but for grinding the thick-shelled crustaceans that dwell in the canyon's nooks. It glides effortlessly from boulder to boulder, scraping its belly against encrusted growths and causing small crabs to scatter into crevices. Each step is deliberate, unhurried, leaving behind disturbed silt that drifts back into place, like settling snow. Behind it, another form appears, sleek and elongated, built for slipping through narrow spaces. Its skin is smooth and reflective, the color of polished obsidian, interrupted only by pale stripes along its sides. It circles the armored giant at a respectful distance, fins fluttering in quick bursts. Then, with a twitch of its tail, it darts toward a cluster of tube worms and snaps one into its small beak-like mouth. Its movement is a flash of surprising speed in the canyon's otherwise stately rhythm. The armored giant pauses, turning its head slightly as if acknowledging the smaller hunter's presence, before resuming its methodical progression. You follow alongside, passing beneath overhangs where stalactites of calcium drip in slow, intermittent drops. Each drop echoes, tiny percussive notes that add to the canyon's muted symphony. Up ahead, you spot a deeper alcove carved into the canyon wall, its entrance draped in veils of silt and algae. The armored creature slips into it, and the sleek form follows. You hesitate a moment, before entering the shadowed recess. Inside, the water feels warmer, and the currents swirl in gentle eddies. The walls are etched with shallow grooves, not natural erosion, but what appear to be tracks, scraped by something large dragging itself across the stone. At the alcove's far end, the creatures pause before a narrow opening that leads to yet another chamber. A soft glow emanates from within, a bioluminescent bloom like a field of living stars. You drift forward, the armored giant dipping its massive head into the glow, gills filtering the luminous water. The glowing plankton swirl around its head like sparks from a forge, then drift back toward you. The sleek hunter circles the bloom, darting in to snatch clusters of plankton and tiny crustaceans, then retreating to the armored giant's flank when larger currents surge. Together they make their way through the glowing patch, the luminous cells parting and recombining around their forms. The glow intensifies, reflecting off their scaled bodies in iridescent patterns. As they exit the chamber, the glow fades abruptly, and the silt settles, leaving a soft afterimage of light dancing across the walls. You follow them back into the open canyon, the slow pulse of silt, and the echo of drip drops guiding you onward. Far above, faint beams of sunlight beckon, marking the way toward the final stretch of this submerged odyssey, where ancient giants once ruled and the ocean's unspoken mysteries remain eternally alive. The canyon widens into a broad, shallow basin, where the fractured plateaus you traversed earlier give way to vast fields of pale sand, mottled with dark stone outcrops. Here, the light softens, a diffuse glow from overhead vents blending with the faint shafts of daylight filtering down. The water feels less confined, moving in gentle pulses, rather than the eddies of the canyon corridor. Each pulse stirs the sand into miniature dunes, only for them to settle again as the flow levels. As you drift across the basin, slender spires of basalt rise like sentinels, some leaning at odd angles, others clustered into small groves. Their sides are encrusted with barnacles and sponges, and feathery hydroids sway like underwater grass in the gentle current. Tiny fish nestle in the spire's crevices, venturing out only briefly to snatch drifting plankton before darting back to safety. The plain's quiet is profound, broken only by the soft hiss of water shearing past your suit, and the distant drip-drip of vent condensation. Ahead, a subtle disturbance ripples through the sand, a smooth arc of displacement moving toward you like a silent wave. As it draws closer, the outline of a massive body becomes visible, a colossal filter feeder, its body a broad, flattened disc with pectoral fins fanning out like wings. Along its edge, hundreds of delicate gill rakers extend into the water, each lined with tiny comb-like structures that sift plankton with precise efficiency. The filter feeder glides just above the basin floor, the silt kicked up by its fins rising in soft, billowing clouds. You follow, watching as it sweeps through the plain, its mouth opening to channel vast volumes of water through its filtering apparatus. Small crustaceans and plankton swirl into the gill cavities, disappearing into the creature's immense maw. Inside, bioluminescent bacteria line its gill chambers, casting an opalescent glow on the interior walls and illuminating the rhythmic motion of its feeding. As it moves on, it is joined by another of its kind, slightly smaller, but equally graceful. The two swim in tandem, their broad bodies folding and unfolding in perfect harmony. They may not be social in the human sense, but their synchronized movements suggest a shared circuit across the basin, a route that brings them to feeding grounds in concert. You drift alongside, the glow of their internal lights reflecting off your visors in dancing patterns. Suddenly, ripples disrupt the feeding. They part as a slender predator darts through the cloud of silt, snatching at escaping morsels. The newly arrived filter feeder pauses, its mouth remaining agape as the predator circles back for another pass. Then, with a flick of its tail, the filter feeder expels a surge of water, a defensive plume that scatters the predator back into the gloom. The second filter feeder joins in, generating its own backwash. The predators retreat, weaving between spires before vanishing into deeper shadows. Relaxing, the giant grazers resume their path, and the filter feeder glows pulse in slow, synchronized beats as they feed. The currents calm, and the basin returns to its steady cadence. You continue across the plain, drawn toward a distant shape, a monolithic archway carved from basalt, its top spanning dozens of meters. The arch stands alone on the sand, framing the pale haze beyond. As you approach, you notice glyphs etched along the arch's inner curve, spirals, concentric rings and branching patterns that echo those in the arch ring and crystalline chamber. The bas-relief lines are shallow but deliberate, smoothed by currents yet still legible. You hover beneath the arch, circling it to study the inscriptions. A sudden swell of current pushes you toward one side, encouraging you to pass through. On the other side lies another basin, smaller, triangular, and enclosed by three towering spires that form a triangular cathedral of stone. This basin's floor is studded with massive flat stones arranged like stepping platforms. On each rests a fossilized shell, half buried and worn smooth, their spirals echoing the glyphs overhead. Between them, shock waves of heated water pulse from vents below, creating alternating zones of warmth and cold. A lone armored giant sifts the basin, its head bent low over the stepping stones. It uses its powerful jaws to crush the shells, extracting the organisms inside. Each shell yields a chorus of smaller life, snails, crustaceans and tiny worms that scatter into crevices, pursued briefly by swift predators. The giant feasts methodically, crushing and filtering, while the basin resonates with the rhythmic clatter of shells and the hiss of sudden jettisons of water. You drift among the stepping stones watching the giant's progress. Its armored plates shimmer with mineral deposits, and you note that each plate is scored with shallow glyphs, miniature echoes of the arch's inscriptions. It is as though the creature carries its own living version of the stone's language, inscribed in its very armor. When the giant's meal is done, it pauses atop a central stone, its body rising above the others like a living obelisk. In the pause, the basin's currents shift to a singular swell, lifting the creature briefly before settling it back. The stepping stones pulse in response, veins of bioluminescent algae, along their edges flaring briefly in a coordinated flicker. The giant's armor plates glow in parallel, marking a moment of communion between creature and stone. At last, the giant turns away, returning to the broad basin beyond the monolithic arch. You follow, bearing witness to the final ritual of the old world, one where giants and glyphs, stone and living flesh, converge in ceremonies older than any human memory. Rising above the basin, the canyon walls reappear, guiding you back toward the open blue of shallower seas. The world of giants fades behind you, but their echoes linger in every carved glyph, in every pulse of bioluminescence, and in the silent memory of the deep. Leaving the monolithic arches, you follow a shifting current that carries you upward along the canyon's outer slopes. The basalt walls transition into terraces of sedimentary rock, layered bands of ochre, rust, and pale grey that form natural steps hundreds of meters across. These terraces are carpeted in drifting silt and dotted with isolated coral thickets, their branches waving in the gentle flow. Tiny fish weave through the corals, while crustaceans scuttle across the rocky ledges, vanishing into crevices at the faintest hint of disturbance. You ascend the terraces, passing one after another, each one giving you a broader view of the canyon's depth. Light filters down in pale shafts, catching floating particles like a cloud of microstars. As you reach the penultimate terrace, the current intensifies, sweeping you toward a massive archway carved in the living rock, a remnant of some ancient collapse. The arch stands alone on the terrace's edge, its span framing the pale water beyond. Drifting through the arch, you find yourself in a vast, open chamber, whose floor is an intricate mosaic of stone and sand. The patterns in the rock resemble waves frozen in time, curving lines that interlock in rhythmic spirals. Between these rock waves, soft sand has collected, creating shallow basins filled with brittle stars and anemones. The chamber's walls are pocked with hollows that hold clusters of bioluminescent worms, their glow pulsing gently in patterns that echo the chamber's mosaic. Ahead, three massive creatures move across the chamber floor, two slender ribbon-finned hunters, and a broader armored grazer. The hunters circle a central rise, a knoll of stone carved into concentric terraces that mirror the floor's mosaic. The grazer feeds in its own slow arc, using flattened plates to crush the brittle stars and anemones for sustenance. Its armor plates bear faint glyphs like those you've seen throughout this world, now worn smooth but still legible in the stone-grey light. As the hunters converge on the grazer, the armored creature pauses its grazing and lifts its head, sensing their approach. The hunters swim in a deliberate dance, their movements weaving between the grazer's armored ridges without touching. Then, through a shared pulse of motion, they guide the grazer toward the central knoll. It follows its gait steady and unhurried, until all three stand atop the highest terrace. Below, the chamber's mosaic pulses in unison with the creature's breaths, grooves of light racing across the rock in concentric waves. The bioluminescent worms respond in turn, their glow intensifying along the chamber walls. Then, in a moment of perfect synchronicity, the trio descends the terraces together, exhaling streams of silt that swirl into grand spirals. The chamber becomes alive with movement, sand plumes, ghostly glows, and the silent rhythm of giants in ceremony. When the spirals settle, the creatures part ways, the hunters gliding back to the chamber's reaches, and the grazer returning to its feeding grounds. The light dims, and the mosaic returns to stillness, leaving only the gentle hum of bioluminescent life. You drift upward, retracing your path through the arch, the chamber's rituals echoing faintly in the terrace's hush. Rising above the terrace, you pass through the final basalt archway and emerge onto a gentle incline, leading back toward shallower realms. The sense of ritual remains, a haunting imprint of giants and glyphs in the deep. Ahead, the canyon walls recede, and the water warms as you ascend toward the world above, where your journey will end, but the ocean's unspoken mysteries will continue beyond your sight. Leaving the terrace behind, you glide upward through a narrowing channel, flanked by basalt spires, whose jagged tips reach toward the distant surface. The water warms gradually, carrying hints of sunlight filtered through layers of seawater. Tiny particles of plankton drift in the current like suspended motes, catching what little light remains. Below, the canyon floor recedes into rolling slopes of mixed sand and stone, dotted with scattered coral heads and the occasional fossilized rib. As you ascend, the channel opens into a vast amphitheater-like inlet, its walls sloping gently toward a central pool of shimmering water. The pool's surface ripples with the faintest current, and its color shifts in bands, from deep indigo at the edges to a pale silvery glow at the center, as though the sea has painted a lens for the light above. You hover just above the pool, watching motes swirl in concentric patterns, guided by unseen undercurrents. At the inlet's far rim, three enormous shapes emerge from the deeper water below, broad-bodied filter feeders, whose pectoral fins span the width of small vessels. Their undersides glow faintly with bioluminescent streaks as they ascend in slow, stately arcs, their mouths agape to channel plankton-rich water through filtering combs. The particles swirl into their gills in soft clouds, then drift upward in luminous wakes that paint the inlet's walls in dancing patterns. Following them, three lean predators glide in a loose formation, built for bursts of speed. Their sleek bodies glint in the silvery glow. Each has a tapered jaw lined with needle-like teeth, and a crest of sensory tentacles that wave ahead of their movement. As the filter feeders rise to the surface, the predators weave through their wakes, darting in to snatch stray prey before the giants filter it out. The result is a silent ballet of predator and prey, choreographed by currents and hunger. On your left, a narrow fissure opens in the inlet's wall, its entrance sculpted by ancient currents into a smooth arch. From within, a soft gurgling sound echoes, the whisper of submerged springs injecting fresh water into the inlet. You drift closer and witness a cascade of tiny bubbles rising in constant streams. Hardly more than vapor, the bubbles coalesce into a shimmering curtain that drapes over a hidden alcove. Behind it, delicate coral fans and brush-like hydroids flourish in the nutrient-rich mix of spring water and seawater. Drawn by curiosity, you pass behind the curtain into the alcove, the spring's warmth enveloping you. The waters here teem with microscopic life, feathery zooplankton that drift through the filtered light in delicate clouds. A lone armored creature, smaller than those you've seen before but no less commanding, resides in the cave's heart. It moves with deliberate grace, using flattened plates to sift the nutrient-laden spring water for nourishment, its armored flanks bearing the same glyph-like scars found throughout these depths. The creature glances at you, its single visible eye reflecting wonder and acceptance rather than fear. In the alcove's hush, you sense a communion between visitor and resident, two beings sharing a fleeting moment in a sanctuary of light and life. After a time, the creature retreats into the deeper recesses of the cave, and you emerge once more into the inlet's silvery expanse. Back in the amphitheater, the filter feeders have reached the surface, their backs slicing through shafts of sunlight that penetrate the depths. They break the water's plane in slow arcs, rising like living islands before settling back into the inlet. The predators follow, their slender bodies cutting brief silhouettes against the sunlit backdrop. You watch their ascent, the world above beckoning with the promise of air and sky. As you rise, the inlet's waters part to reveal a final arch, a natural bridge of stone carved by the slow dance of currents and time. Beyond it lies the open ocean, its surface rippling with the day's last light. You drift through the arch, feeling the warmth of the sun's rays touch your gear for the first time in hours. Tiny waves lap the channels of bars you leave behind, carrying with them the echo of songs and rituals you've witnessed deep below. Breaking the surface, you emerge into the golden light of dusk, the silhouettes of distant mountains, and the endless horizon greeting you. Below the inlet lies hidden once more, a cradle of giants and glyphs, of stone and song, a world you will carry in memory long after you return to air. In the fading glow of day, you look back at the rippling sea, its surface tranquil, yet hiding abysses filled with giants and secrets beyond imagining. Everywhere you turned in those sunken corridors, cathedrals of stone and cavernous depths, life revealed itself in forms both fearsome and majestic. You have witnessed rituals older than continents, songs carved in crystal, and dances of light woven by creatures as vast as legends. Now rising toward the sky, you carry more than memories. You bear the ocean's unspoken mysteries within you. From the armored behemoths of basalt canyons to the luminous filter feeders of hidden vents, Every encounter has etched its pattern upon your mind. And though your journey ends here, beneath the waves unfathomable worlds await discovery, their stories inscribed in currents, glyphs, and the living stone. As you sail into the horizon, the sea's silent song continues beneath, an eternal testament to life that thrives beyond sight, awaiting the next traveler brave enough to listen.